The Martinez family Christmas dinner was in full swing when my nephew Dylan stood up, iPhone in hand, that familiar smirk spreading across his face, the one that meant he was about to be the center of attention at someone else's expense. "Hey everyone, you gotta see this." He waved his phone like a trophy. "Remember Uncle Jamie's big tech startup? The one he wouldn't shut up about?" I set down my fork, already knowing where this was headed. Dylan had been needling me all evening, making snide comments about my little computer thing while his parents, my brother Carlos and sister-in-law Maria, beamed at their Stanford-bound golden child. "Look what I found." Dylan connected his phone to the smart TV. Of course Carlos had to have his 85-inch screen visible from the dining room. Uncle Jamie's company website. Except check out the web archive from last month. The screen filled with what looked like my company's website, but with a bright red banner. Notice, Quantum Solutions Inc. has ceased operations effective immediately. All services have been discontinued. My stomach clenched. That wasn't real. My company was very much operational, but Dylan had decent Photoshop skills. I'd taught him myself back when he still called me his favorite uncle. And look at this. He swiped to another fake screenshot. Their LinkedIn page, company status, out of business. And here's a Reddit thread. Another Austin tech startup bites the dust. Quantum Solutions closes after burning through funding. The room erupted. "Oh, Jamie," my mother sighed, shaking her head. "Another one? I told you tech was too risky." Carlos boomed, cutting into his prime rib with satisfied vigor. "Should have gone into real estate like me. At least you tried, hermano." My sister Lucia patted my shoulder with that condescending sympathy that made my teeth hurt. Dylan wasn't done. He'd prepared a whole presentation, more fake screenshots, fabricated investor complaints, even a mock news article about Austin's failed startup scene with my company logo prominently featured. The best part, Dylan laughed, scrolling through his phone, is that Uncle Jamie was so confident. "Remember last year? We're going to change the industry. Just wait until our Series B funding." Man, what happened? Uncle Jay? Dylan, that's enough, Maria said half-heartedly, but she was hiding a smile behind her wine glass. "What? I'm just showing what I found online. It's all public information." He shot me a triumphant look. Maybe now Uncle Jamie will stop acting like he's better than everyone else with his entrepreneur lifestyle. I stood up slowly, pulling out my own phone. "You're right, Dylan. Everything online is public information, like scholarship announcements." His smirk wavered slightly. "What, Maria?" I turned to my sister-in-law. "Congratulations again on Dylan getting that full ride to Stanford. The Endeavor Foundation scholarship, wasn't it? Very prestigious." "Yes," Maria preened. $50,000 a year for 4 years. They only give out one per state. We're so proud." "You should be." I dialed a number, putting it on speaker. "Hey, Rebecca? Jamie Chen here. Sorry to call on Christmas." "Jamie," the warm voice filled the dining room. "No problem at all. Merry Christmas. What can I do for you?" "I need to cancel the anonymous scholarship for Dylan Martinez. The full Stanford package." The room went silent. You could hear the gas fireplace crackling in the living room. I'm sorry?" Rebecca sounded confused. "The Endeavor Foundation scholarship? But that's already been awarded. The announcement went out 2 weeks ago." "I understand. Please cancel it. Cite a violation of the moral character clause. I'll send over the documentation tonight." "Jamie, that's a $200,000 commitment. Are you absolutely certain?" "Completely certain." "Wait." Maria's voice cracked. That was you?" Dylan's phone clattered onto the table. "Uncle Jamie, you're the anonymous donor?" I ended the call and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Was, past tense. "You can't do that." Carlos stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "He's already accepted. He's already told everyone. Then he'll have to tell everyone it's been rescinded." I picked up my keys. Maybe use those Photoshop skills to make a nice announcement graphic. "Jamie, please." Maria grabbed my arm. "He's just a kid. He didn't mean anything by it. He's 18. Old enough to know that publicly humiliating someone has consequences. Old enough to understand that destroying someone's reputation for entertainment isn't a game. But it was just a joke." Dylan's voice had lost all its smugness. "I made those screenshots as a prank. Funny how it doesn't feel like a joke when it's your future disappearing, is it?" "You funded the scholarship?" my mother whispered. "All these years of Endeavor Foundation scholarships, that was you?" 8 years. 1 full ride per year. I started it when my company hit its first million in profit. I looked at Dylan. "You weren't the first recipient. You were going to be the last." "Going to be?" Lucia caught the implication. "I'm discontinuing the program. Apparently, I can't afford it now that my business has failed." "This is insane," Carlos roared. You're destroying our son's future over a Christmas prank? No. Dylan destroyed his own future when he decided to create fake evidence of my company's failure. Do you have any idea what would happen if those screenshots went viral? If investors saw them? If clients Googled us and found his fake Reddit threads? He didn't post them anywhere else, Maria pleaded. Just showed the family. And how long before he shares them with friends? Posts them on social media for laughs? Tags me to own me publicly? I shook my head. He spent hours creating those forgeries. This wasn't an impulse. This was calculated. Dylan had gone pale. I'll delete everything. I'll tell everyone I made it up. Please, Uncle Jamie, I need that scholarship. My parents can't afford Stanford without it. I know. I headed for the door. Neither could the 7 students who came before you. Difference is, they were grateful enough not to publicly humiliate their benefactor. Jamie, my mother called after me. It's Christmas. Family forgives. I turned back one last time. Family also doesn't create elaborate lies to destroy each other for entertainment. Dylan wanted everyone to think I'm a failure? Fine. Failures can't fund scholarships. How are we supposed to pay for Stanford? Maria was crying now. The same way I paid for MIT, I said quietly. Loans, work-study, summer jobs. You know, the character-building experience you all said made me stronger. I left them there. Dylan frantically trying to show his parents the fake posts while they shouted over each other. My phone buzzed with texts before I even reached my car, but I ignored them all. The next morning, I met Rebecca at her office. She ran the Endeavor Foundation, a legitimate charity I'd partnered with to maintain anonymity. Are you sure about this? She pushed the cancellation papers across her desk. The Martinez boys file was impressive. National Merit Scholar, varsity athletics, volunteer work. He's also someone who thinks destroying others for entertainment is acceptable. I signed the papers. The scholarship agreement includes a moral character clause for a reason. What about the other scholarships? You fund 8 active students right now. They continue as normal, but no new recipients. I'm closing the program after the current students graduate. Rebecca sighed. It's your money, but Jamie, what that boy did was cruel. Ending a program that helps deserving students. Isn't that cruel too? Maybe, but I'd rather be cruel than naive. I've been anonymous all these years because I wanted it to be about the students, not me, but Dylan just proved why that was a mistake. Hard to mock someone's failures when you know they're paying your tuition. I left her office and drove to my actual company, the one that was very much not failed. Quantum Solutions occupied 2 floors of a downtown Austin high-rise. Not bad for something that started in my garage 8 years ago. Morning, Mr. Chen. The security guard nodded. Working on Christmas weekend? Just picking up some files. Frank, Merry Christmas. My office overlooked the city skyline. The wall behind my desk held framed articles, real ones, not Dylan's fabrications. Austin Startup Land's major defense contract. Quantum Solutions named to Inc. 5,000. Local entrepreneur funds anonymous scholarship program. That last one had always been my favorite. Now it felt like a mockery. My phone had blown up overnight. 43 missed calls. Over 100 texts. I scrolled through them. Carlos, you're destroying our family over nothing. Maria, please reconsider. Dylan learned his lesson. Lucia, Mom is heartbroken. Come to dinner tomorrow and fix this. Dylan, Uncle Jamie, I'm sorry. Please answer. I'll do anything. The last one was a video message from Dylan. I almost deleted it unopened, but curiosity won. His face was blotchy, eyes red. The golden boy looked thoroughly tarnished. Uncle Jamie, I'm sorry. I was jealous. Okay? You always had these cool stories about your company, and everyone always compared me to you. Why can't you be more like your Uncle Jamie? Even with a full ride to Stanford, it was never enough. So when I couldn't find anything about your company online, I thought if I could prove you weren't perfect, maybe they'd stop. I made those screenshots weeks ago. I was just waiting for the right moment. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I set the phone down and stared out at Austin's skyline. Somewhere out there were 8 students who'd never know my name, attending their dream schools because I believed education should be based on merit, not money. Dylan had merit, stellar grades, test scores, extracurriculars. But he also had something else, a mean streak wide enough to destroy someone he claimed to love for a few minutes of attention. My phone rang. Rebecca. The foundation board is meeting Monday, she said. They want to discuss the situation. If you're willing to continue funding, they might override the cancellation. They feel one mistake shouldn't define the boy's future. One mistake? I laughed bitterly. He spent hours creating those forgeries, downloaded my company logo, matched our website fonts, crafted fake Reddit usernames to bash us. That's not a mistake, Rebecca. That's a campaign. Will you at least come to the meeting? Hear them out? Fine, but my decision stands. That evening, I got an unexpected visitor. My mother stood at my condo door with a foil-covered plate. "You missed dessert," she said simply. I let her in. We sat at my kitchen counter, sharing her homemade flan in silence. "You really paid for all those scholarships?" she finally asked. "Yes, why didn't you tell us?" "Because I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I remember eating ramen for 4 years, working 3 jobs, falling asleep in the library. If I could spare even one kid that experience." "Dylan didn't know," she said softly. "That's the point, Mom. He tried to humiliate me, thinking I was vulnerable. What about the next person he targets? Someone who actually is struggling? Someone whose business really is failing? Is it okay to kick them while they're down as long as it gets laughs?" She sighed. "Carlos is talking about taking out a second mortgage. They have options: loans, state schools, community college for 2 years then transfer. You know, all the things they said would build character when I was applying to colleges. You're not going to forgive this, are you?" "I'll forgive it, Mom, but actions have consequences." Dylan wanted to be the guy who exposed his uncle's failure. Congratulations to him, he succeeded. Failed businesses don't fund scholarships. She left the rest of the flan and kissed my forehead before leaving. "You were always the stubborn one." Monday's foundation meeting was a formality. The board expressed disappointment but acknowledged my right to withdraw funding. They'd try to find another donor for next year, but anonymous full-ride scholarships were rare. I kept tabs on the family through social media. Dylan's Stanford announcement post quietly disappeared. He ended up at UT Austin, a great school, but not Stanford. Carlos and Maria refinanced their house. The family dinners I was no longer invited to looked significantly smaller. 6 months later, I was at a coffee shop when someone called my name. Dylan stood there in a Starbucks apron, looking older than his 19 years. "Uncle Jamie," he shifted nervously. I work here part-time. The campus location. How's UT? "It's good, really good, actually. I'm majoring in computer science." He attempted a smile. "Following in your footsteps, I guess, just with more student loans." "Dylan, I need to say something," he interrupted. "What I did was horrible, not just because of the scholarship. I tried to destroy something you built because I was petty and jealous. Every time I make a loan payment, I think about those fake screenshots. I think about how easy it was for me to try to tear down 8 years of your work for 5 minutes of attention. And I'm sorry, really sorry, not because of what I lost, but because of what I tried to take from you. Your reputation, your credibility, things that actually matter." I studied him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been wisdom earned the hard way. "Apology accepted," I said finally. "How's the job?" "Exhausting, but I'm learning a lot about customer service and humility." He grimaced. "Turns out I needed both." "We all do, sometimes." "Uncle Jamie, why anonymous? The scholarships, I mean, you could have gotten so much recognition." "Because it was never about me. It was about kids getting opportunities." I stood to leave. "Take care, Dylan." "Wait," he called after me. "Is it true you're funding a new program?" My mom heard something. I smiled. "The Chen Foundation Tech Internship Program. Paid positions at Quantum Solutions for promising students. Full transparency this time. No anonymity." Would you consider?" "Applications open in the fall. We look at grades, experience, and character references, especially character references." He nodded, understanding. "I'll work on that last part." "Do that." I left him there and walked back to my office, my very much operational, increasingly successful office. The Endeavor Foundation Scholarship Program died that Christmas night, but something new was born from its ashes, a program with my name on it, where recipients would know exactly who was betting on their future. Because Dylan taught me something valuable that Christmas: anonymous generosity is beautiful in theory, but it can't protect itself from those who mistake kindness for weakness. My new program would help just as many students, but they'd know who to thank. And more importantly, they'd know who they were representing. The fake screenshots Dylan created never surfaced again, but the real headlines about Quantum Solutions kept coming. Austin tech company launches revolutionary internship program. Chen Foundation commits $2 million to student development. Local CEO turns family drama into philanthropic win. That last one made me laugh. They had no idea how much drama it had really been. But in the end, Dylan was right about one thing: everything online is public information, including the Chen Foundation's recipient list, where his name will never appear. Some lessons are worth $200,000, both for the teacher and the student.
The aroma of my grandmother's famous roast filled the dining room of her Victorian mansion, but all I could smell was the condescension. My sister Amanda adjusted her Cartier bracelet, shooting another disapproving glance at my simple outfit as she passed the gravy boat. "So, Olivia," she started, her voice dripping with fake concern, "are you still doing that food thing?" 3 years ago, when I left my 6-figure corporate job to start a food truck, my family had treated it like a personal insult. Now, sitting at our traditional Christmas dinner, they still saw me as the embarrassment, the Harvard MBA graduate who chose to sling tacos instead of joining the family investment firm. If they only knew. "The food truck is doing well," I said quietly, cutting into my roast beef. The sterling silver knife had been passed down 4 generations, just like the expectations I'd chosen to ignore. "Well?" Uncle Philip scoffed from the head of the table. "How well can a street vendor do?" "Really, Olivia, your father would be mortified." Dad had passed away 5 years ago, leaving behind a legacy of traditional success, board seats, country club memberships, and rigid expectations for his children. Amanda had followed the plan perfectly, becoming a senior partner at a prestigious law firm. I'd chosen a different path. "I make enough to get by," I said, hiding a smile behind my wine glass. The 82 Bordeaux probably cost more than what they thought I made in a month. "Getting by isn't the Anderson way," Amanda declared. "Do you know I just made partner? The youngest in the firm's history." "Congratulations," I murmured, checking my phone discreetly under the table. Another notification from my CFO. The Tokyo acquisition had closed. 5 more restaurants added to the empire they knew nothing about. "You could still come work for me," Uncle Philip offered, not for the first time. "There's always room at Anderson Capital for family, even after your unfortunate career choices." I thought about the documents in my bag, the Forbes magazine, the acquisition papers, the proof of everything I'd built, while they were busy looking down their noses at my little food truck. But not yet. Timing was everything, in business and in revenge. "How much can you possibly make with a food truck?" My cousin Bradley chimed in. "I mean, what's your annual revenue?" 5 figures? He laughed at his own joke. 5 figures. I fought back a laugh. Last quarter's revenue alone was north of 9 figures. But they didn't need to know that. Not until the perfect moment. Speaking of figures, Amanda set down her fork with precise movements. "We should discuss the family trust. Now that I'm partner, I think it's time to reassess the distribution." And there it was. The real reason for the increased disdain this year. Grandma's eyebrows rose slightly. She might be approaching 90, but she missed nothing. "The trust is set up fairly," Grandma said firmly. "Equal shares for all grandchildren. But some of us are clearly doing more with the opportunity," Amanda pressed. "Some of us are upholding the family name, while others—" She glanced pointedly at me and my off-the-rack dress. I thought about my latest acquisition, a chain of high-end restaurants across 3 continents. The paperwork had closed this morning, adding another billion to the empire I'd built from a single food truck with a unique fusion menu and a dream. "Amanda," Grandma warned, but my sister was on a roll. "No, this needs to be said. Dad left us a legacy. And what did you do with your portion of the initial inheritance, Olivia? Bought a truck and some cooking equipment? It's embarrassing." That initial inheritance, $250,000 each, had been the catalyst. Amanda had bought a luxury condo. I had invested in my first food truck. East meets West eats, with a menu that combined Asian street food with American classics. The lines had started forming by the second week. "You're right," I said softly. "I did buy a truck." Finally, she admits it. Amanda threw up her hands. A Harvard MBA, serving street food. Do you know what people say? How it reflects on us? I thought about the write-up in last month's Wall Street Journal, carefully hidden from my family. The stealth restaurant queen. They'd called me, detailing how I'd quietly built one of the fastest-growing hospitality groups in the world. And that ridiculous name, Bradley added, East meets West eats. Sounds like a cheap takeout joint. The name that was now trademarked in 47 countries. The brand that had grown from one truck to 300 restaurants. The empire that none of them had noticed building because they were too busy judging its humble beginnings. "I saw your truck at the business district last week," Amanda continued. "Standing there in the cold, serving food to office workers. Is that really what you want to do with your life?" I had been at the truck that day, not because I had to be, but because I still worked it once a month. It kept me grounded, connected to where I started. The fact that none of them recognized me in my food truck uniform, quietly serving corporate warriors and construction workers alike, said everything about how they saw service workers. "You know," Grandma interrupted, her voice carrying that subtle authority that came from old money. "Your grandfather started in manufacturing, actually worked the factory floor." "That was different," Uncle Philip protested. "Those were different times." "Were they?" I asked quietly. "Or do we just pretend they were to justify looking down on certain kinds of work?" Amanda rolled her eyes. "Oh, spare us the working-class hero speech. You're not some inspirational story, Olivia. You're a cautionary tale. I mean, seriously, a food truck? How embarrassing." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Around the table, I saw the familiar looks. Pity, disappointment, condescension. They'd been the same looks I'd gotten 3 years ago when I parked my first truck on the corner of 47th and Madison. Slowly, deliberately, I reached for my bag. "You're right, Amanda," I said, pulling out the latest issue of Forbes. "It is pretty embarrassing." Finally, she sees reason. Amanda sat back, triumphant. "Yeah," I continued, sliding the magazine onto the table. "Being called the fastest-growing restaurant chain in North America is pretty embarrassing. Almost as embarrassing as this cover photo." The silence that fell over the table was absolute. On the magazine cover, I stood in my chef's whites, arms crossed, with the headline, "The Food Truck Revolution. How Olivia Anderson Built a Billion-Dollar Empire One Meal at a Time." Grandma's fork clattered to her plate. The silence at my grandmother's antique dining table stretched like pulled caramel, sweet, tense, and ready to snap. Amanda's face had gone through several shades of red before settling on a sickly pale. Uncle Philip's hands trembled as he reached for the magazine. This is impossible," he stammered, flipping pages frantically. "Billion-dollar empire?" $3 billion, actually," I corrected gently. "The magazine went to print before the Tokyo acquisition closed this morning." Bradley choked on his wine. "Tokyo." I took another bite of roast beef. 43 high-end fusion restaurants across Japan. They approached us after our success in Singapore last year. "Us." Amanda's voice was barely a whisper. "Who is us?" "East meets West Restaurant Group. Though we maintain different brand names for different market segments. The food trucks, there are 50 of them now across major cities, still carry the original branding. The fine dining establishments use more elevated names. Love fusion, Grandma said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. She smiled. That new place on Fifth Avenue that's impossible to get into. That's yours, isn't it? I nodded. Along with Golden Bridge in San Francisco, Sky Fusion in Chicago, and about 300 other locations worldwide. Uncle Philip was still staring at the magazine. But how? When? Remember when I said I was getting by with the food truck? I pulled out my phone, opened my portfolio app. The first truck grossed $800,000 in its first year. By year 2, we had 5 trucks and our first small restaurant. The concept proved so popular, we had investors begging to get in on series of funding. Series A. Bradley leaned forward. Like startup funding? We've gone through Series F now, I said casually, though I maintained controlling interest. Never let investors dictate your vision. Amanda found her voice. But you work the truck. I've seen you. Standing there in that uniform. I work every location at least once. It's company policy. Everyone from the CEO down has to regularly experience the front lines. Keeps us connected to our customers and staff. I smiled. Those days you saw me? I was probably making 7 or 8 figures in other deals between serving orders. The trust fund, Amanda said suddenly. Your portion. What did you? Is still untouched. I cut in. Every penny of this was built from that first food truck. Though speaking of the trust, I pulled another document from my bag. Grandma, I'd like to discuss something with you after dinner. Grandma's eyes twinkled. She'd always been sharper than anyone gave her credit for. Would this have anything to do with Anderson Capital's recent difficulties? Uncle Philip's head snapped up. How did you know that your firm is on the verge of bankruptcy? I finished for him. Because I've been buying your debt through shell companies for the past year. Waiting for the right moment. The color drained from his face. You? What? Remember last March when you loudly told everyone at Easter brunch that my little food experiment would never amount to anything? That was the same day I purchased the majority of your corporate bonds at a discount. Interesting timing, wouldn't you say? Amanda stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. This is a trick. Some kind of elaborate joke. You serve tacos from a truck. Actually, I said, pulling up a photo on my phone. Today's truck special was Kobe beef sliders with wasabi aioli and pickled daikon. We sold out by noon, just like we do every day, at every location. I turned to Grandma. Which reminds me, how would you feel about us opening a location here? The old Anderson factory building is empty, and I think the symmetry would be appropriate. The factory isn't for sale, Uncle Philip snapped. Actually, Grandma said softly, I believe it is. And I think it's a wonderful idea, Olivia. You can't be serious. Amanda's voice rose to a shriek. She abandoned the family business, chose to become a food vendor. No, I corrected, standing slowly. I chose to build my own business, and now I'm offering to help save yours. I turned to Uncle Philip. Anderson Capital needs a capital injection of roughly $300 million to avoid bankruptcy. I'm prepared to offer that in exchange for a controlling interest and a complete reorganization of the management structure. He slumped in his chair. How do you know the exact amount? Because I've had a team analyzing your books for months. Did you really think that new junior analyst, the quiet one you never bothered to speak to, was just another employee? She reports directly to me. Bradley whistled low. Damn, cuz, that's cold. No, I said firmly. Cold is mocking someone's dreams. Cold is assuming that success only looks one way. Cold is treating service workers like they're beneath you while they're building empires you never noticed. I reached into my bag one final time, withdrew a stack of contracts. So here's how this will work. Anderson Capital becomes a subsidiary of East Meets West Restaurant Group. Uncle Philip, you'll be offered a position on our board, non-executive, of course. Amanda, that corner office of yours. The building was part of a real estate package I acquired last month. Expect some changes to the lease terms. You can't do this, Amanda whispered. Actually, I can. And I am. I turned to Grandma. With your blessing, of course, as the family matriarch. Grandma looked around the table, at Uncle Philip's defeated slump, Amanda's shocked fury, Bradley's growing admiration, and then back to me. Her eyes were bright with something that looked like pride. You know, she said, your grandfather didn't just work the factory floor. He also drove the delivery truck himself, every Saturday, even after he bought the company. She lifted her wine glass. To new beginnings, built on honest work. I raised my glass in return, but Amanda wasn't finished. This isn't over, she hissed. You might have your fancy restaurants and your corporate takeovers, but you're still the girl who built $1 billion empire while you were busy looking down your nose at a food truck. I suggested. Who now owns the building where you work, the loans your firm took out, and the future of the family business? I smiled. You're right. It's not over. In fact, it's just beginning. I checked my phone one last time. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to take this call. The London expansion won't negotiate itself. I stood straightening my simple dress. Oh, and Amanda? That food truck you saw me working last week? We made $3,000 in 2 hours. Pretty embarrassing, right? 1 month after the Christmas dinner revelation, I sat in what used to be Uncle Philip's office on the top floor of Anderson Capital. The mahogany desk remained, but the wall of vintage photos showing 3 generations of Anderson men had been replaced with a single image. My first food truck, parked on a busy street corner, with a line of customers stretching around the block. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Come in. Amanda entered, looking uncomfortable in business casual rather than her usual designer suits. The new dress code had been just one of many changes. The quarterly reports you asked for, she said stiffly, placing a folder on my desk, and the staff feedback surveys about the new corporate lunch program. Ah, yes, my favorite innovation. Every Anderson Capital employee now got free lunch from one of our food trucks, which rotated through the corporate plaza daily. It was good for morale and even better for reminding certain executives where real success could start. Thank you, I said, opening the folder. How are you adjusting to the new position? Her jaw tightened. As part of the reorganization, I'd moved her from senior partner to head of community outreach, a role that required her to actually interact with the people she'd spent years looking down on. It's educational, she managed. Good, because I need you to handle something special. I pulled up a calendar on my tablet. Next week is the grand opening of our new flagship location. The factory conversion? She frowned. I thought that was months away. I smiled. When you have 300 restaurants worldwide, you learn how to move quickly. The old Anderson factory will reopen next Thursday as Heritage Hall, a combination high-end restaurant, culinary school, and community space. And what do you need from me? You'll be managing our scholarship program, full-ride culinary training for promising students from underprivileged backgrounds. The same people you used to walk past without seeing when they were working in food service. Her face flushed. Is this punishment? For how we treated you? No, Amanda. It's opportunity. The same kind I had. The chance to build something meaningful, regardless of where you start. I stood, walking to the window. Did you know that 70% of our restaurant managers started as line cooks or servers? That our Tokyo expansion is being led by a woman who began as a dishwasher? I didn't know that. Of course not. Because you, like most people born to privilege, never looked past the surface. Never saw the potential in a food truck, or a service worker, or any success that didn't match your predetermined vision. Bradley's voice came from the doorway. But you saw it all along, didn't you? I turned to find my cousin leaning against the frame, looking surprisingly comfortable in the chef's whites he now wore as part of our management training program. Someone had to, I said. After the Christmas revelation, Bradley had been the first to approach me about learning the business from the ground up. He'd spent the past month working in our kitchens, learning every aspect of operations. The calluses on his hands had replaced his Rolex as his new badge of honor. The first truck arrives in 10 minutes, he said. Ready for the lunch rush? Amanda looked confused. You're not actually going to work the truck? Of course I am. I removed my blazer, revealing the familiar East meets West uniform underneath. Every executive works a shift at least once a week, including you, starting today. Me? Her voice rose an octave. But I'm not. I don't know how to. You'll learn. Bradley grinned. Like I did. Nothing teaches humility like getting slammed during lunch rush. As if on cue, Uncle Philip appeared, already in his uniform. The former banking titan had surprised everyone by embracing his new role in operations management with unexpected enthusiasm. Today's special is selling out at every location, he reported. The fusion faux burger concept is a hit. Good. I handed Amanda her uniform, because we're about to serve it to 300 hungry finance workers who used to be your colleagues. She stared at the clothes like they might bite. I can't. Yes, you can. And you will. I checked my phone. Grandma's coming to observe, by the way. She's considering investing in our next expansion round. That got her attention. Grandma? Working a food truck? Not working, though she offered. She wants to see the magic happen. I smiled. She said it reminds her of when Grandpa used to let her ride along in the delivery truck, back when the Anderson name meant something more than just status. Amanda looked at the uniform again, then at me. Is this really what you want? To have us all serving street food? No, I said quietly. What I want is for you to understand that every job has dignity. Every worker has potential. Every success story has a beginning. I gestured to the photo of my first truck. That wasn't embarrassing. It was foundational. The sound of voices rose from the plaza below, the lunch crowd gathering, drawn by the now familiar sight of our trucks. Time to work, Bradley announced. Coming, sis. Amanda hesitated for one more moment, then took the uniform. I still think you're crazy, she said, but there was less bite in her voice than before. Crazy enough to build an empire from a food truck, I reminded her. Crazy enough to save the family business. Crazy enough to believe that sometimes the best revenge isn't serving it cold, it's serving it with a side of humble pie. As we headed down to the plaza, I thought about that first day with my truck, the doubt and determination that had driven me. The empire had grown beyond my wildest dreams, but the core remained the same. Good food, honest work, and the quiet satisfaction of proving everyone wrong. Hey, Olivia. Amanda called as we reached the plaza. That wasabi aioli sauce. Will you teach me how to make it? I smiled. Maybe there was hope for her yet. First rule of the kitchen, sis. You have to earn your recipes. Now let's show you how to work the grill. The scent of sage and memories filled Grandma Rose's Victorian mansion as I pulled into the curved driveway. Cars were already parked everywhere, expensive SUVs and luxury sedans that hadn't been here when Grandma was alive. Just 3 months after her funeral, and they'd already moved in like vultures. I sat in my car for a moment, hand resting on the leather briefcase in my passenger seat. Inside was the document that would shatter their Thanksgiving dinner. Grandma's real will, not the convenient forgery my Aunt Helen had presented to the family. Remember, sweetheart, Grandma had whispered to me 2 weeks before she passed, pressing a small brass key into my palm. The truth is in my study. 3rd drawer down behind the false back. Wait for the right moment. Now, watching my cousins stride around the property like they owned it, I knew that moment had come. Well, look who finally showed up. My cousin Marcus called out as I approached the front door. Didn't think you'd have the nerve to come back after everything. I smiled politely, clutching my briefcase. Wouldn't miss Thanksgiving, Marcus. Grandma always said it was the most important day of the year. He scoffed. Grandma's not here anymore, and soon, neither will you be. Inside, the house felt wrong. Aunt Helen had already started redecorating. Grandma's cherished antique mirrors were gone, replaced by modern art pieces. The Persian rug that had witnessed 50 years of family gatherings had vanished. Even the air smelled different. Designer candles instead of Grandma's signature apple pie. Oh, you came. Aunt Helen's voice cut through the hallway. She stood in the doorway to the living room, martini in hand, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my car. I thought we made it clear you weren't welcome anymore. You did, I replied calmly. Multiple times. Through your lawyer, through email, and through that lovely eviction notice you taped to my door yesterday. Then why are you here? Because Grandma would have wanted me at her table. One last time. She narrowed her eyes but couldn't argue without seeming cruel in front of the gathered relatives. Fine, but after dinner, we're discussing your departure. Permanently. The dining room was full of familiar faces wearing unfamiliar expressions. Uncle George, who used to slip me $20 bills at Christmas, now couldn't meet my eyes. Cousin Sarah, who'd shared secrets with me during summer sleepovers, sat stiffly in Grandma's chair. My other aunt, Margaret, busied herself with her phone, pretending I didn't exist. I took my seat, the furthest from the head of the table, next to the kitchen door. The same spot they'd put Grandma in her final years, after they decided she was too difficult to deal with. Before we begin, Aunt Helen stood, raising her glass. I want to thank everyone for coming to our first Thanksgiving in our new home. Mother would have wanted the house to stay in the family, and now it has. Several relatives nodded approvingly. They'd all received generous gifts from Aunt Helen after accepting her version of the will without question. And speaking of staying in the family, she continued, her voice hardening as she looked at me. Some people need to understand when it's time to let go. This house belongs to us now. The will was very clear. Was it? I asked quietly, placing my briefcase on the table. The room went silent. Even the children stopped fidgeting with their phones. What's that supposed to mean? Marcus demanded. It means, I said, maintaining my calm, that I find it interesting how quickly everyone accepted a will that wasn't even properly witnessed. A will that contradicted everything Grandma had planned for decades. Aunt Helen's face flushed. How dare you suggest? I'm not suggesting anything, I interrupted, my hand resting on the briefcase. I'm just wondering if anyone bothered to ask why Grandma would suddenly change her entire estate plan 2 weeks before she died, when she was supposedly too confused to make decisions. She was sick, Aunt Margaret chimed in quickly. She wasn't thinking clearly. Really? I pulled out my phone and pressed play on a video I'd recorded the day before she passed. Grandma's voice, clear and strong, filled the room. My darling grandchild, if you're watching this, they've done exactly what we suspected they would. The vultures are circling, thinking I don't see their schemes. But I've prepared for this. The key I gave you, use it when they show their true colors. Aunt Helen's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. That proves nothing, she snapped, but her voice trembled slightly. You're right, I agreed, finally opening my briefcase. But this might. The dining room air grew thick with tension as I pulled out the document. Cream-colored paper with Grandma's distinctive blue ink signature at the bottom. My hands didn't shake. They'd shaken plenty 3 months ago when I'd first found it, but not anymore. What is that? Uncle George's voice cracked slightly. This, I said, carefully unfolding the papers, is Grandma's actual will. Dated 2 months before she died, properly witnessed by Judge Martinez and Dr. Collins, both of whom, by the way, are very much alive and very clear about Grandma's mental state when she signed it. Aunt Helen shot up from her chair. That's impossible. We have the will right here. She rushed to the sideboard drawer, pulling out a document that looked remarkably similar. Ah, yes, I nodded. The convenient will that appeared after Grandma's death. The one that gave you control of everything and divided the rest among everyone who wouldn't ask questions. Tell me, Aunt Helen, did you really think no one would notice the witness signatures were from people who died 5 years ago? Silverware clattered as Cousin Sarah dropped her fork. What is she talking about, Mom? She's lying. Aunt Helen snapped, but her face had gone pale. This is ridiculous. We all know your grandmother wanted. Wanted what? I cut in, my voice sharp. Wanted to give away the house she loved. Wanted to disinherit the grandchild who took care of her for the last 3 years, while you were all too busy to visit. Wanted to reverse every decision she carefully planned for decades. I stood up, pulling out my phone again. Should we call Judge Martinez? He's having dinner with his family, but I'm sure he'd be happy to confirm which will he witnessed. Or maybe Dr. Collins. He was quite upset when he learned someone had forged a will while he was still very much alive to testify. The room erupted in chaos. Cousin Marcus lunged for the papers, but I pulled them back quickly. Careful, I warned. The police have copies, and so does the district attorney's office. Forgery is a serious crime, after all. Police, Aunt Margaret whispered, her face ashen. You went to the police? No, I replied calmly. Judge Martinez did. The moment he learned someone had used a dead person's signature to forge a will he supposedly witnessed. Uncle George stood up, his legs shaking. Helen, what did you do? Aunt Helen's composure finally cracked. I did what Mother should have done. This house belongs in the right hands, not with some sentimental fool who'd preserve it like a museum. The right hands? I laughed softly. You mean the hands that couldn't be bothered to visit her? The hands that were too busy planning renovations while she was still alive? Those right hands. I began reading from the real will. To my beloved grandchild, who showed me true love and care in my final years, I leave my entire estate, including the house at 1242 Maple Grove and all its contents. To those who chose material wealth over family bonds, I leave this lesson. Karma comes for us all. The silence that followed was deafening. "You're lying?" Marcus sputtered. "This is some kind of trick. Would you like to see the video of Grandma signing it? Or perhaps the notarized statements from the witnesses? I have those too." I pulled out more documents. "Or maybe you'd like to explain to the police why you all claimed a will was witnessed by people who died years ago." Aunt Helen suddenly lunged for her purse. "This is absurd. I'm calling our lawyer." "Lawrence Sterling?" I asked innocently. "He resigned as your counsel this morning. Ethical concerns," he said. "Something about not wanting to be involved in estate fraud." The turkey grew cold on the table as reality settled over the room. Children whispered to parents, asking questions no one wanted to answer. Aunt Margaret began quietly crying into her napkin. "You have until the end of the weekend to remove your belongings," I said, returning the real will to my briefcase. "The locks will be changed on Monday." "You can't do this," Aunt Helen hissed. "We're family." I turned to her, feeling the weight of Grandma's final words to me. "Family isn't about blood, sweetheart. It's about who shows up when it matters." "Yes," I replied, "we are family. Which is why I'm giving you time to leave with dignity, instead of having the police escort you out now." The grandfather clock in the hallway, one of the few pieces Aunt Helen hadn't dared remove, chimed 7 times. Somewhere in the kitchen, the pies Grandma would have baked were replaced by store-bought imitations, just like the fake Will had tried to replace her real wishes. But truth, like cream, always rises to the top. As evening shadows crept across Grandma's dining room, the family that had gathered for Thanksgiving dinner sat in stunned silence. The revelation of the true Will had shattered more than just their inheritance plans. It had exposed years of lies and manipulation. "There's one more thing," I said, reaching into my briefcase one final time. "Grandma left individual letters for each of you." The envelopes I pulled out were in Grandma's favorite lavender stationery, each name written in her elegant handwriting. I began distributing them around the table. Aunt Helen's hands trembled as she received hers. More accusations from the grave. "No," I replied softly. "Grandma called them love with lessons. She wrote them during her last month, when you were all too busy planning her estate to visit." One by one, they opened their letters. The room filled with the sound of rustling paper and muffled sobs as Grandma's final words reached them. Cousin Sarah broke first, tears streaming down her face as she read. She knew I came to the house when everyone was asleep, just to check on her. She thanked me for the secret midnight talks. "Of course she knew," I said. Grandma noticed everything, like how Uncle George would leave groceries on the back porch, but was too ashamed to come in after following Aunt Helen's orders to stay away. Uncle George's head snapped up, his letter clutched tightly in his hands. How did she? The same way she knew Aunt Margaret was fighting with her conscience every time she signed another document pushing Grandma out of her own life decisions. I turned to my younger aunt, who was staring at her letter in shock. "She forgave you, by the way. She understood the pressure you were under." Marcus stood abruptly, his letter unread. "This is emotional manipulation." "No," I corrected him. "This is the truth you've been running from. The truth about who you all chose to become." I moved to Grandma's chair, her real chair, the one Aunt Helen had banished to the attic. I'd brought it down earlier today, another small act of restoration. "Grandma spent her last years watching all of you choose money over memories, renovation plans over relationship repair. She saw you measuring the drapes while she was still sitting in her favorite window seat. But she never stopped hoping you'd remember who you used to be. Aunt Helen, who had been unusually quiet, finally opened her letter. As she read, the color drained from her face. She knew about the first will, didn't she? She whispered. The one I changed. I nodded. She knew everything. The forged documents, the secret meetings with contractors, even the plans to turn her rose garden into a parking area. But she wanted to give you a chance to choose differently. By leaving everything to you. Marcus scoffed, but his voice lacked his usual venom. No, I pulled out one final document. By leaving everything in trust, with specific conditions. The room went still again. The house stays intact for 10 years, I explained. During that time, any family member who wants to reconnect, truly reconnect, not just show up for inheritance claims, is welcome. After 10 years, if genuine change has happened, the trust will be dissolved, and the property divided equally among those who proved family means more than fortune. And you're the judge of that? Aunt Helen's voice was bitter. No, I smiled slightly. Judge Martinez is, along with Dr. Collins and Pastor Roberts, people who knew Grandma's heart and can't be bribed or manipulated. I stood up, looking around the table at the faces of my family, some angry, some ashamed, all shaken. Grandma believed in second chances. She also believed in consequences. This is both. You have 10 years to remember who you were before greed poisoned everything. 10 years to prove that somewhere inside each of you, there's still a trace of the family she loved. The grandfather clock struck 8, its chimes echoing through the silent room. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, covering the property in a clean white blanket. Nature's way offering a fresh start. The choice is yours now, I said, gathering my things, just like it always was. As I walked toward the door, Aunt Margaret called out, "Where are you going?" I turned back one last time, to the kitchen. Grandma taught me how to make her apple pie. It's not Thanksgiving without it. Anyone who wants to remember what family really tastes like is welcome to join me. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Sarah stood up, wiping her tears. I remember how she taught us to crimp the edges. One by one, others stood. Uncle George, Aunt Margaret, even some of the younger cousins who had only known Grandma through stories. Aunt Helen and Marcus remained seated, their letters crumpled in their hands. "The door is open," I said to them. For now, just like Grandma would have wanted. In the kitchen, as we began pulling out ingredients and sharing memories, I felt Grandma's presence in every corner. This was her real legacy, not the house, not the money, but the chance for healing she'd orchestrated even after she was gone. The snow continued to fall outside, covering all the old footprints, offering everyone a clean page to write their next chapter. Some would take it, some wouldn't, but at least now, the choice was truly theirs. And somewhere I knew Grandma was smiling.
My name is Marcus Chin, and at 24 I never expected my college graduation to become the day I finally stopped apologizing for who I am. Standing in that sea of black caps and gowns, waiting for my name to be called, I could hear my parents' whispered conversation 3 rows behind me in the family section. Such a disappointment. My mother's voice carried just loud enough for nearby families to hear. 4 years of college and still no direction. My father's response was equally cutting. Should have studied something practical like his sister. Engineering, not this liberal arts nonsense. I kept my eyes forward, hands folded in my lap, the familiar ache of their disapproval settling in my chest like an old friend. Before I reveal what happened when Dean Martinez made that announcement about the anonymous donor, Let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that like button if you've ever felt like the family disappointment despite your best efforts. Growing up as the middle child in the Chin family meant living in perpetual shadow. My older sister Emma was the academic superstar, valedictorian MIT engineering degree, now designing aerospace systems for Boeing. My younger brother David was the athletic prodigy, state champion swimmer, full scholarship to Stanford Olympic training program. Then there was me, Marcus, who liked to read philosophy books and wrote poetry in his spare time. Our two-story house in suburban Sacramento looked picture-perfect from the outside, complete with my mother's meticulously maintained garden and my father's luxury sedan always gleaming in the driveway. Inside, achievement charts tracked Emma's GPA and David's swim times. My name appeared sporadically, usually in smaller print, celebrating participation rather than victory. My parents, Dr. James Chin and Linda Chin, both successful professionals, Dad as a cardiologist, Mom as a financial advisor, had very specific ideas about success. It involved numbers, rankings, and clear career trajectories. My passion for literature and philosophy didn't translate well to their dinner table conversations about market portfolios and medical conferences. Poetry doesn't pay the bills, Dad would say whenever I mentioned my writing. When are you going to grow up and choose a real major? My junior year of high school, I won a regional creative writing competition. The prize was $1,000 and publication in a literary magazine. I rushed home excited to share the news, only to find my parents celebrating David's latest swimming record. My announcement was met with polite nods before the conversation returned to David's potential for Olympic qualification. That night I found my prize check sitting unopened on the kitchen counter. Beneath it, my mother had placed college brochures for business and pre-med programs. The message was clear. Your achievements don't matter unless they align with our expectations. The pattern continued through high school and into college. When I chose to study English literature with a philosophy minor at UC Davis, my parents treated it like a phase I'd eventually outgrow. They attended Emma's MIT graduation with pride, taking hundreds of photos and hosting a celebration dinner for 40 relatives. When David signed his Stanford scholarship, they framed the contract and hung it in the living room. My college acceptance letter was acknowledged with a brief congratulations, before Dad asked if it was too late to change my major to something practical. During my freshman year, I discovered I had a talent for understanding complex literary theories and philosophical concepts. My professors encouraged me to pursue graduate studies, possibly even a PhD. Professor Williams, my Victorian literature instructor, told me I had the sharpest analytical mind she'd encountered in 15 years of teaching. But when I called home excited about potentially pursuing academic research, Mom's response was predictable. How much do professors make? Can you support a family on that salary? By sophomore year, I'd learned to keep my academic achievements to myself. Dean's List honors, paper presentations at undergraduate conferences, research assistantships. None of it seemed to matter to my parents. They'd ask about my grades as an afterthought, usually while praising Emma's latest promotion or David's swimming victories. The real turning point came during my junior year. Professor Martinez, who taught my modern philosophy seminar, approached me after class one afternoon. "Marcus," he said, "I've been thinking about our discussion on social impact through intellectual contribution. Have you ever considered that success might not always look like what others expect?" That conversation stayed with me for weeks. I began researching social entrepreneurs, writers and thinkers who had created meaningful change through unconventional paths. I discovered stories of people who had built significant wealth and influence through creativity, innovation, and intellectual pursuits. That summer, instead of taking the internship at my father's medical practice that he'd arranged, I quietly started a small business. Using skills I'd developed in my philosophy courses, critical thinking, argument construction, ethical reasoning, I began offering consulting services to local nonprofits. Many organizations needed help with grant writing, strategic planning, and ethical frameworks for their programs. My first client was a literacy foundation struggling to articulate their mission for a major grant application. Using techniques I'd learned in my writing courses, I helped them craft a compelling narrative that secured $150,000 in funding. They paid me $2,000 for 2 weeks of work. Word spread quickly through the nonprofit community. Organizations valued my unique combination of analytical thinking, writing skills, and genuine passion for social causes. By the end of summer, I'd earned more money than David made from his part-time coaching job. But I didn't tell my parents. Not yet. Senior year began with the familiar family dynamics. Emma visited for Thanksgiving, regaling everyone with stories of her engineering projects and substantial salary. David shared updates from Stanford, his Olympic training progress, and his girlfriend who was also a competitive swimmer. When attention turned to me, I offered vague updates about my coursework and thesis project. Still planning to be a perpetual student? Dad asked during dessert. Emma was making six figures by your age. Not everyone can be as practical as Emma, Mom added with false sympathy. We just hope you'll find your way eventually. Behind their condescension, I was building something they couldn't see. My consulting business had grown to include clients across California. I specialized in helping education-focused nonprofits, literacy programs, and organizations working with underprivileged youth. The work felt meaningful, but it was also lucrative. By Christmas break, I'd saved nearly $50,000. But the money wasn't the point. Through my work, I'd discovered something that would change everything. Many of the organizations I worked with were struggling with the same fundamental problem: lack of access to quality educational resources. Libraries in low-income communities were understaffed and underfunded. Schools lacked basic books and technology. Students had academic potential but no support systems. That's when I learned about UC Davis's campaign to build a new library. The university had been fundraising for 3 years, but they were still $2 million short of their goal. The proposed library would serve not just university students, but the broader Sacramento community, with special programs for literacy education and community outreach. During winter break, I met with the development office. I didn't go as Marcus Chin, college senior. I went as Marcus Chin, consultant and potential donor. The meeting was with Sarah Rodriguez, the university's director of major gifts. She outlined the library project's vision: a state-of-the-art facility that would serve as a community hub, offering literacy programs, technology access, and educational support for underserved populations. The building would include spaces for tutoring, after-school programs, and adult education classes. The impact would be transformative, Sarah explained. We estimate serving over 10,000 community members annually, many of whom currently lack access to these resources. I asked detailed questions about the timeline, the specific programs, and the naming opportunities. When she mentioned that a $2 million donation would fund the entire community outreach wing, I knew what I had to do. I'd like to make a donation, I said. $2 million with specific conditions. Sarah's eyes widened. That's incredibly generous. May I ask about your connection to the university? I'm a current student, I replied. But I'd like the donation to remain anonymous until graduation day. Can you arrange for the announcement to be made during the commencement ceremony? The next few months were a whirlwind of legal paperwork, financial transfers, and careful planning. I liquidated my business savings, took out strategic loans against future earnings, and structured the donation through a private foundation I established. The legal work was complex, but my philosophy coursework had taught me to think systematically about complex problems. By March, the donation was complete. Construction on the new library wing began immediately, with completion scheduled for fall semester. The university was thrilled, but honored my request for anonymity until graduation. Meanwhile, my family continued their familiar patterns. Emma announced her engagement to a fellow engineer, complete with a celebration dinner and congratulations from extended family. David qualified for Olympic trials, earning local newspaper coverage and another family celebration. When I mentioned I was graduating summa cum laude with honors in both my majors, the response was muted congratulations before conversation shifted to Emma's wedding planning. At least you'll finish college, Mom said with forced positivity. Now you can start thinking about real career options. 2 weeks before graduation, I received the final construction photos from Sarah Rodriguez. The new library wing was beautiful, bright, modern, filled with natural light and designed to welcome learners of all ages. The community programs were already accepting applications, with overwhelming response from local families. Your donation will literally change lives, Sarah wrote in her email. Thank you for believing in our mission. But my parents remained unaware of everything I'd built. To them, I was still Marcus, the disappointment, the one who'd wasted 4 years studying impractical subjects while his siblings achieved real success. Graduation morning arrived with typical family dynamics. Emma and David flew in for the ceremony, their achievements dominating breakfast conversation. My mother spent 20 minutes discussing Emma's wedding registry while my father scrolled through David's latest swimming videos. Try to look professional in the photos, Mom instructed as we prepared to leave for the ceremony. Emma's colleagues might see them on social media. The irony wasn't lost on me. In a few hours, everyone would understand exactly how professional I'd become. The graduation ceremony took place in the university's main amphitheater, a grand space that could hold 8,000 people. Families filled the tiered seating while graduates assembled on the field in neat rows organized by school and major. I sat with my fellow English and philosophy graduates, listening to the opening remarks and watching families in the stands. 3 rows up I could see my parents. Dad checked his phone periodically while Mom pointed out other families to Emma, commenting on their clothing choices and apparent success levels. David took selfies with his girlfriend, both of them looking slightly bored by the academic ceremony. The first part of the ceremony proceeded predictably. The provost spoke about academic achievement, the student body president delivered remarks about our shared journey, and various deans recognized graduating students from their schools. I walked across the stage when my name was called, shaking hands with Dean Martinez and receiving my diploma folder. The applause was polite but unremarkable. From the stands, I heard Emma's enthusiastic cheering. She was genuinely proud, even if our parents viewed my degree as a consolation prize. Marcus Chin, the announcer said, graduating summa cum laude with dual honors in English literature and philosophy. My parents clapped politely. I caught my mother leaning over to whisper something to Emma, probably commenting on how long it had taken me to reach this basic milestone. What happened next changed everything. Dean Martinez returned to the podium for the final remarks. Before we conclude today's ceremony, he announced, I have a special recognition to share with our community. The amphitheater quieted as graduates and families focused their attention on the stage. 3 months ago, our university received an extraordinary gift, Dean Martinez continued. An anonymous donor contributed $2 million to fund our new community learning center, a library wing that will serve not just our students, but thousands of community members who need access to educational resources. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the crowd. I remained seated, heart pounding, knowing what came next. This donation represents the largest single gift from a community member in our university's history, the dean continued. Today, our anonymous donor has asked to be recognized publicly for the first time. My parents were paying attention now, probably curious about which wealthy family was being honored. The donor's vision was simple but powerful. Education should be accessible to everyone, regardless of economic circumstances. This new facility will provide literacy programs, technology access, and educational support to over 10,000 community members annually. I could see Sarah Rodriguez standing in the wings, holding a large ceremonial check and a bouquet of flowers. Ladies and gentlemen, Dean Martinez announced, I'd like to ask our donor to join me on stage. Marcus Chin, please come forward. The amphitheater fell completely silent. 8,000 people turned to look at the graduating students, trying to locate the person whose name had just been called. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady, and began walking toward the stage. The silence stretched, broken only by my footsteps and the distant sound of construction equipment from the new library wing. From the stands, I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. That's our Marcus, she whispered, confusion evident in her voice. As I climbed the steps to the platform, Dean Martinez beamed with pride. Marcus Chin, class of 2024, whose extraordinary generosity will impact our community for generations to come. The crowd erupted in applause, but I was focused on the family section. My parents sat frozen, staring at me with expressions I'd never seen before. Emma had tears in her eyes, her hand covering her mouth in shock. David had lowered his phone, finally paying complete attention. Sarah Rodriguez approached with the ceremonial elements of the recognition. Dean Martinez handed me a beautiful plaque commemorating the donation, while Sarah presented flowers and posed for photos. Would you like to say a few words? Dean Martinez asked, offering me the microphone. I accepted it with trembling hands and looked out at the sea of faces, graduates, families, faculty, all waiting to hear from the 24-year-old who had just been revealed as a major philanthropist. "Thank you," I began, my voice stronger than I'd expected. "When I started college 4 years ago, my parents worried that studying literature and philosophy wasn't practical. They thought I was wasting time on subjects that wouldn't lead to real success." I found my family in the crowd. My mother was crying now, though I couldn't tell if it was pride, shock, or regret. But what I learned in my literature courses was how to understand human stories, human needs, human potential. Philosophy taught me to think critically about social problems and ethical responsibilities. These impractical subjects gave me the tools to build a consulting business that serves nonprofits across California. The applause grew stronger. I could see my professors in the faculty section, beaming with pride. More importantly, these studies helped me understand that success isn't just about personal achievement. It's about using your abilities to create opportunities for others. This library will serve students like me who need quiet spaces to study, but it will also serve working parents trying to earn their GEDs, children who don't have books at home, and seniors learning to use computers. I paused, looking directly at my parents. Sometimes the most practical thing you can do is follow your passion and use it to serve others. That's what real success looks like. The standing ovation was thunderous. I handed the microphone back to Dean Martinez and returned to my seat, legs shaking from adrenaline. But the ceremony wasn't over. Dean Martinez had one more surprise. The university has voted to name the new facility the Marcus Chin Community Learning Center, he announced. A permanent reminder that education transforms not just individuals, but entire communities. If the previous applause was loud, this was deafening. The entire graduating class stood up, followed by their families, followed by the faculty. 8,000 people on their feet, celebrating not just my donation, but the principle it represented. I sat in my chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. For 4 years I'd felt invisible, dismissed, undervalued. Now, my name would be permanently attached to a building that would serve my community for decades. When the ceremony concluded and graduates began finding their families, I walked slowly toward the family section. My parents stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking uncertain for the first time in my memory. My mother reached me first. "Marcus," she whispered, "we had no idea." My father looked stunned. $2 million? How is that possible? Before I could answer, Emma engulfed me in a hug. "I'm so proud of you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I had no idea what you were building." David, usually confident and articulate, seemed speechless. "Bro," he finally managed, "that was incredible." Other families began approaching, congratulating me and expressing amazement at the recognition. Parents who had previously overlooked me now wanted to know about my business, my future plans, my path to success. But I was focused on my own parents, who stood slightly apart from the crowd, still processing what they'd witnessed. "The consulting business," my father said slowly. "When did that start?" "Junior year," I replied. "I've been working with nonprofits, helping them with strategic planning and grant writing. The skills I learned in my literature and philosophy courses turned out to be exactly what they needed." My mother shook her head in disbelief. "Why didn't you tell us?" It was a fair question and one I'd been preparing to answer for months. "Because you'd already decided my choices were wrong," I said gently. Every conversation about my studies included criticism or suggestions to change direction. I needed space to build something without constant doubt and disapproval. The hurt in their eyes was evident, but so was the dawning recognition of their own role in my silence. "We thought we were helping," Mom said quietly. "We just wanted you to be secure, successful." "I am successful," I replied. "Just not in the way you expected." Over the following hours, as we attended the reception and took family photos, the dynamics began shifting. Emma asked detailed questions about my business model and client base. David wanted to understand how I'd managed to save $2 million while still in college. My parents listened quietly, absorbing information about a son they realized they'd never really known. The photos from that day tell the story. In the earlier shots taken before the ceremony, I look tense and uncertain while my family appears confident and proud of Emma and David. In the later photos taken after the library announcement, everyone's expressions have changed. I look confident and proud while my parents appear humbled and reflective. That evening at the family dinner they'd planned to celebrate my graduation, the conversation was unlike any we'd ever had. Instead of defending my choices or explaining my plans, I found myself in the position of strength, sharing insights about social entrepreneurship and discussing my vision for expanding my consulting work. I've been invited to speak at 3 conferences this summer, I mentioned casually. Organizations want to understand how to blend profit with social impact. My father leaned forward. What kind of organizations? Universities, foundations, corporate social responsibility departments. Turns out there's significant demand for consultants who understand both business strategy and social justice frameworks. Emma smiled. Philosophy and literature aren't looking so impractical now, are they, Dad? My father had the grace to look embarrassed. Marcus, I owe you an apology. We've been wrong about your path and we've been wrong in how we've supported you. My mother nodded. We're proud of Emma's engineering success and David's athletic achievements because we understand those paths. But we never took time to understand yours. It was the first time either of them had acknowledged their bias, and it opened space for a conversation we should have had years earlier. I don't need you to understand everything I do, I said. But I need you to trust that I'm capable of making good decisions, even when they don't match your expectations. The weeks following graduation brought a series of adjustments. My parents began asking genuine questions about my work rather than offering unsolicited advice about career changes. They started sharing news of my achievements with extended family and friends, something they'd never done before. Emma and I grew closer as she expressed genuine interest in my consulting approach. Her engineering background and my philosophical training created interesting collaborative possibilities. We began discussing ways to apply social impact frameworks to technology projects. David, surprisingly, became one of my strongest supporters. He started sharing my story with his Stanford teammates, many of whom were interested in careers that combined athletic discipline with social entrepreneurship. Most importantly, my parents began recognizing that success can take many forms. They still worried about practical concerns like financial security and career stability, but they stopped assuming that unconventional paths were automatically wrong. The Marcus Chin Community Learning Center opened 3 months after graduation. The dedication ceremony drew over 500 community members, including many of the families who would benefit from the programs. I spoke briefly about the importance of accessible education, but the real stars were the community members who shared how the facility would impact their lives. Maria Santos, a single mother completing her GED, talked about finally having a quiet space to study while her children attended the center's after-school programs. James Wilson, a military veteran transitioning to civilian life, described the technology training that would help him pursue a new career in web development. 8-year-old Aisha Johnson read a poem she'd written in the center's youth literacy program. My parents attended the dedication, sitting in the front row and listening to speaker after speaker describe the center's impact. During the reception, my mother approached Maria Santos and had a long conversation about the challenges of returning to education as an adult. Your son created something beautiful, Maria told my mother. This place is going to change everything for families like mine. Later, my mother told me it was the first time she'd truly understood what my donation meant beyond the impressive dollar amount. I saw your success, she said. But today I saw your impact. The business continued growing throughout the summer. My client base expanded to include national organizations, and I hired 2 part-time assistants to help manage the workload. By fall, I was earning more annually than many of my peers who had chosen practical majors. But more importantly, I'd found a career that aligned with my values and utilized my skills. The critical thinking abilities I'd developed in philosophy courses proved invaluable for strategic planning. The analytical and communication skills from literature studies were essential for grant writing and program evaluation. My parents gradually acknowledged what Professor Martinez had tried to tell me years earlier. Success doesn't always look like what others expect. During Thanksgiving dinner that year, the family dynamics had shifted completely. Emma shared updates about her engineering projects, David discussed his training progress, and I talked about my consulting work and community impact. But instead of competing for attention or approval, we found ourselves supporting each other's different paths. I've been thinking, my father said during dessert, about starting a foundation focused on healthcare access in underserved communities. Marcus, would you be interested in helping with the strategic planning? It was the first time he'd asked for my professional expertise, recognizing that my skills might be valuable for his own philanthropic goals. "I'd love to help," I replied. "But I think you might be surprised by what effective philanthropy requires. It's not just about writing checks." He smiled. "I'm beginning to understand that. Your approach with the library, the research, the strategic thinking, the community engagement, that's exactly what I need to learn." 6 months later, we launched the Chin Family Foundation together. My parents provided the funding, but I developed the framework for identifying effective programs and measuring social impact. Emma contributed technological solutions for program delivery, while David designed fitness and wellness components for our healthcare initiatives. What started as a family disappointment had become a family collaboration, with each of us contributing our unique strengths to shared goals. The most profound change, though, was in how my parents understood success itself. They began talking about Emma's work not just in terms of salary and prestige, but in terms of how her aerospace innovations could benefit society. They started asking David about his plans for using his athletic platform to promote youth fitness and education. And they stopped apologizing for my choices or suggesting alternative careers. Instead, they introduced me as our son Marcus, who runs a social impact consulting firm and funded the new Community Learning Center at UC Davis. 1 year after graduation, I was invited to give the commencement address at UC Davis. Standing at the same podium where Dean Martinez had announced my donation, I looked out at a new class of graduates and their families. "1 year ago, I sat where you're sitting," I began, listening to my parents whisper about what a disappointment I was. They worried that studying literature and philosophy was impractical, that I was wasting my education on subjects that wouldn't lead to real success. I found my parents in the family section smiling proudly. But what I discovered is that success isn't about choosing the most obviously practical path. It's about developing your abilities and using them to create value for others. Sometimes the most practical thing you can do is follow your passion and apply it to solving real problems. The applause was warm and encouraging, but I was focused on one specific message. If you're sitting here today feeling like the family disappointment, if your choices don't match others' expectations, if you're pursuing something that seems impractical to people who love you, remember that they can only see the beginning of your story. The middle and end might surprise everyone, including yourself. After the ceremony, dozens of students and parents approached me with questions about unconventional career paths, social entrepreneurship, and following passion while building security. Many shared stories similar to mine, feeling dismissed or undervalued because their interests didn't align with family expectations. But the conversation that mattered most was with my own parents. "We're sorry it took us so long to see," my mother said as we walked across campus toward the Marcus Chin Community Learning Center. "We thought we were protecting you from disappointment, but we were actually creating it." My father nodded. "We measured your worth by Emma and David's achievements instead of recognizing your own path. That was our failure, not yours. You weren't wrong to want security and success for me," I replied. "You just had a narrow definition of what those look like." We spent an hour touring the learning center, watching community members of all ages engaged in various programs. The facility was bustling with activity. Children in the literacy program, adults learning computer skills, teenagers getting homework help, seniors participating in book clubs. "This is your legacy," my father said, watching an elderly man help a young girl with her reading. Not just the building, but the connections, the opportunities, the lives changed. As we prepared to leave campus, I reflected on the journey from disappointment to recognition. The transformation hadn't just been in my circumstances. I'd been building success all along. The real change was in how my family understood and valued that success. Driving home, my mother asked about my future plans. Did I want to expand the consulting business? Was I considering graduate school? What about marriage and family? But her questions had a different tone now. She wasn't asking because she doubted my choices or wanted to redirect my path. She was asking because she was genuinely interested in my life and proud of what I was building. "I'm exactly where I want to be," I replied. "Building something meaningful, using my skills to create opportunities for others, proving that unconventional paths can lead to extraordinary outcomes." 2 years later, as I write this story, the business has grown to serve clients in 12 states. The Chin Family Foundation has funded educational programs serving over 5,000 students. Emma and I are collaborating on technology solutions for nonprofit organizations. David is using his athletic success to promote youth development programs. Most importantly, my parents have become genuine supporters rather than skeptical observers. They brag about my achievements to their friends, ask thoughtful questions about my work, and trust my judgment about major decisions. The family disappointment became the family success story, not because I changed direction, but because they learned to see the value in the direction I'd chosen all along. If you're reading this as someone who feels undervalued or misunderstood by people who love you, remember that external validation is less important than internal conviction. Build something meaningful, serve others authentically, and trust that the right people will eventually recognize your worth. Sometimes the most profound success comes from proving that the path others couldn't see was exactly the right one for you. Have you ever felt like the family disappointment despite your accomplishments? How did you find the courage to pursue your path despite others' doubts? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this journey of turning disappointment into triumph resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the people who believe in you least can motivate you most, not to earn their approval but to prove to yourself just how extraordinary your unconventional path can become.
The kitchen still smelled like Sunday pot roast, but the familiar comfort of family dinner had turned sour. I sat at the oak table where we'd shared meals for 28 years, watching my mother's perfectly manicured nails drum against her wine glass. My father's silence was heavy, expectant, and my brother Michael, well, he just looked smug. "Sarah," Mom began, using that tone she reserved for what she called difficult conversations. "We need to discuss your house situation." My house situation, as if the 3-bedroom Victorian I'd bought after 5 years of saving every penny from my consulting job was somehow a problem that needed solving. What about it? I kept my voice neutral, though I already knew where this was heading. The whispered phone calls, the family meetings I wasn't invited to, Michael's sudden interest in my neighborhood. "Your brother's getting married," Dad finally spoke up. "He and Emma need somewhere to start their life together. Something established." I took a slow sip of water, letting the ice clink against my teeth. "They can't afford their own place." "Don't be difficult," Mom snapped. "Emma's family is very particular about appearances. They expect certain standards." Of course they did. Emma came from old money, the kind that looked down on Michael's middle-class background. Our family's desperate attempts to impress her parents had been almost painful to watch. "And my house meets these standards?" I asked. "It's in the right neighborhood," Michael chimed in. "Good schools nearby for when we have kids. Plus, you're just one person. You don't need all that space." Just one person. Like my worth was somehow diminished by my single status. "I bought that house myself," I reminded them. "Every penny of the down payment, every mortgage payment, that was my money." "And we're offering to compensate you," Dad said, pulling out a folder. "We've had it appraised. We'll pay you what you put into it." I opened the folder. The number they were offering was barely 2/3 of the current market value. "This is significantly under." "It's a family matter, Sarah," Mom cut in. "We're not trying to make a profit here. We're trying to help your brother start his life." "And what about my life?" I asked quietly. Michael rolled his eyes. "Come on, sis. You can always buy another place. Maybe something more appropriate for your situation." The way he said situation made my skin crawl. Like being single and successful was some kind of character flaw. "I'm not selling my house," I said firmly, closing the folder. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's fingers stopped their drumming. Dad's jaw tightened. Michael's smug smile faltered slightly. "Sarah," Mom's voice had turned cold. "This isn't a request. Your brother needs the house more than you do. Sign it over, or don't bother coming back to this family." I stood up slowly, smoothing my skirt. I see. Don't be dramatic, Dad sighed. We're trying to do what's best for everyone. Everyone, except me. I picked up my purse, tucking the insulting offer inside. I'll think about it. There's nothing to think about, Michael said. Emma's already planning the renovations. That stopped me. You showed her my house? We took a tour last week, Mom admitted. While you were at work. They'd been in my house, without my knowledge, without my permission, planning to take it from me before they'd even had this conversation. I need to go, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Sarah, Mom called as I reached the door. Don't make this difficult. Family means sacrifice. I turned back one last time, taking in the scene. The family dinner I'd never be invited to again if I didn't comply. The parents who saw me as nothing more than a resource for my brother's happiness. The brother who'd never worked for anything in his life. You're right, I said softly. Family does mean sacrifice. I walked out into the cool evening air, my heels clicking against the sidewalk. In my car, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. My hands shook slightly as I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd been saving for just such an occasion. Marcus, it's Sarah Reynolds. Remember that conversation we had about property investment? I'm ready to move forward. Yes, all of it. And I need it done by morning. I started the engine, watching the lights go on in my parents' living room. They probably thought I was having some kind of emotional breakdown in the driveway. They probably expected me to cave by morning, to come crawling back with signed papers and apologies. They had no idea what I'd been building while they were busy planning my brother's perfect life. No idea that I'd spent the last 3 years quietly buying up properties through a holding company. No idea that I owned half the commercial real estate in their precious neighborhood. And certainly no idea that this morning, while they were planning their ambush over coffee, I'd finalized the purchase of the company that owned their mortgage. Tomorrow, they'd learn what real sacrifice looked like. Tomorrow, they'd discover exactly who they tried to bully. But tonight I would go home to my beautiful Victorian, pour myself a glass of wine, and prepare for the storm I was about to unleash. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Just sign the papers. I smiled, typing back. You're right. Family means sacrifice. See you tomorrow. Then I turned off my phone, pulled into my driveway, and walked into the house they thought they could take from me. The antique chandelier I'd restored myself cast a warm glow over the hardwood floors. The kitchen where I'd hosted dinner parties gleamed with modern appliances. Every corner held memories of my hard work, my independence. Over my dead body, I whispered to the empty rooms. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. Morning arrived with a kind of crisp clarity that only comes before life-changing moments. I dressed with precision. Charcoal gray suit, pearl earrings, hair swept back in a professional knot. Power dressing for power moods. My phone had exploded overnight. 15 missed calls from Mom, 12 from Dad, countless texts from Michael ranging from demanding to pleading. I ignored them all as I made coffee in my soon-to-be infamous kitchen. At exactly 8:30 a.m., my doorbell rang. Right on time, I murmured, opening the door to find Marcus waiting with a leather briefcase. Everything's ready, he said, following me to the dining room. The paperwork was filed first thing this morning. You now officially own Highland Property Management. I smiled, spreading the documents across my antique table. And the notices? Being delivered as we speak. He checked his watch. Should hit your parents' mailbox in about 10 minutes. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. Michael calling for the 16th time. I finally answered, putting it on speaker. Sarah, where are you? Mom and Dad are freaking out. We need to finish this house thing today. Actually, I replied calmly, I'm at home, in my house, where I'll be staying. Don't be ridiculous, he snapped. We had a deal. No, Michael, you had a plan. I never agreed to anything. He started to respond, but I heard commotion in the background. Mom's voice, shrill with panic. Michael, get over here now. What's going on? He demanded. Why don't you go find out? I suggested. I have a feeling you'll want to be there for this. I ended the call and turned to Marcus. How long do you think it'll take them to figure it out? He grinned, straightening his tie. Given what's in those notices, about 3 minutes. Right again. My phone exploded with texts. Mom, what a hey you doing? Dad, call me immediately. Michael, this has to be a joke. I took a sip of coffee, savoring the moment. The notices they just received would inform them that Highland Property Management, their property management company, had been acquired by a new owner, that all existing rental agreements were under review, that their monthly rent was being adjusted to reflect current market values. A car screeched into my driveway, Michael's BMW, burning rubber in his haste. He burst through my front door without knocking, waving papers wildly. What is this? He demanded, face red with rage. Our rent just doubled. The management company. Highland Property Management, I supplied helpfully. Yes, I bought it this morning. Surprising how many properties they manage in this neighborhood, including Mom and Dad's house, and your condo. He staggered slightly, falling into a chair. You can't do this. Actually, I can. Just like you thought you could take my house. I slid a document across the table. By the way, your lease is up for renewal next month. We should discuss terms. This is insane, he sputtered. I'm calling Dad. Already here. Dad's voice boomed from the doorway. He and Mom rushed in, both clutching identical notices. Sarah Jean Reynolds. Mom started, using my full name like I was still 16. What do you think you're doing? I stood slowly, commanding the room. Making a business decision, just like you taught me family matters should be handled. By becoming our landlord. Dad's voice cracked slightly. By doubling our rent? Market value, I corrected. The same way you valued my house well below market when you tried to take it. Michael jumped up. This is blackmail. No, I said calmly. This is business. But since you mentioned it, I nodded to Marcus, who opened his briefcase again. Let's discuss your renovation plans for my house. The ones you made without my knowledge or consent. Mom's face paled. How did you? I have excellent sources. I spread out photos on the table. Emma and Michael touring my house, measuring rooms, discussing changes with a contractor. Breaking and entering is still illegal, last I checked, even for family. We had a key, Michael protested. For emergencies, I reminded him. Not for planning how to take my property. Dad stepped forward, his businessman mask finally sliding into place. What do you want? Simple. I handed him a new folder. Inside, you'll find 3 documents. First, a formal acknowledgement that my house is not up for discussion. Ever. Second, new lease agreements for all your properties at current market rates. And third, A family contract establishing clear boundaries about financial decisions. And if we refuse? Mom's voice was ice cold. I smiled. Then you'll need to find new places to live. I hear the next neighborhood over is lovely, though it might not meet Emma's family's standards. Michael lunged forward, but Marcus stepped smoothly between us. I wouldn't, he advised quietly. Assault charges would look bad on those country club applications. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock, another piece they'd probably planned to claim for Michael's new life. You're destroying this family, Mom whispered. No, I corrected. I'm teaching it about consequences and respect. Sign the papers, and we can all move forward. Refuse, and you can start packing. Dad picked up a pen, his hand shaking slightly. We don't have a choice, do we? There's always a choice, I said softly. Just like I had a choice last night when you tried to bully me out of my home. I chose to fight back. One by one, they signed. Michael last, his signature an angry scrawl across the paper. Get out, I said quietly. All of you. And don't ever try to take what's mine again. They left in silence, the weight of their defeat heavy in the air. As the door closed behind them, Marcus whistled low. Remind me never to cross you, he said, gathering the signed papers. I sank into my favorite armchair, the one Emma had planned to throw out during her renovations. They never saw me coming. What now? I looked around my beautiful home, my hard-earned, fiercely protected sanctuary. Now we wait for phase 2. Because this wasn't just about keeping my house. This was about teaching them a lesson they'd never forget. And it was far from over. The fallout was spectacular and immediate. Within hours, the family grapevine was buzzing. Aunt Patricia called to express her concern about my mental state. Cousin Jennifer posted a vague Facebook status about greed destroying families. Emma's mother apparently had a fainting spell when she learned her future daughter-in-law would be living in a common rental. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the next phase of my plan. A week after the confrontation, I sat in my home office reviewing documents when my assistant, Kate, knocked. The audit reports are in, she announced, placing a thick folder on my desk. You're going to want to see this. I opened the folder, scanning the contents. Everything I'd suspected about my family's financial dealings was there in black and white. Years of tax discrepancies, questionable property transfers, and most importantly, evidence that my parents had been skimming from my trust fund, the one my grandmother had left specifically to me, for years to support Michael's failing business ventures. How our lawyers verified everything? I asked. Kate nodded. Triple-checked. It's all admissible. I leaned back, letting the implications sink in. Schedule a family meeting. Tomorrow night. Here. All of them. Every last one. I smiled. Time for the other shoe to drop. The next evening, my living room filled with family members, all trying to mask their discomfort at being in the house they tried to take from me. Mom sat rigid on the edge of the sofa, Dad paced by the fireplace, and Michael slouched in a corner with Emma, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Thank you all for coming, I began, standing before them. I know the past week has been challenging. If you called us here to gloat, Michael started. Actually, I cut him off. I called you here to discuss Grandma Alina's trust fund. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mom's perfect posture faltered slightly. That's not up for discussion, Dad said quickly. Those accounts were settled years ago. Were they? I opened my laptop, connecting it to the TV screen. Because according to these audit reports, those accounts were anything but settled. The screen filled with transaction records, dozens of transfers from my trust fund to various shell companies, all leading back to Michael's failed startups. $3 million, I continued calmly. That's how much you took. Money that Grandma explicitly left for my education and future. Money you used to bail out Michael's disasters while telling me the fund had been depleted by market crashes. We were protecting the family business, Dad protested weakly. No, I corrected. You were protecting your golden child, at my expense. Again. Emma stood abruptly. I think I should leave. Stay, I commanded. You should hear this too. After all, you're marrying into this mess. I clicked to the next screen. A detailed timeline of Michael's business failures and the corresponding cover-ups. 7 failed ventures in 5 years, I narrated. Each one funded with stolen money. Money that was legally mine. It wasn't stealing, Mom interjected. We were redistributing family resources. Save it, I cut her off. I've already spoken with the estate lawyers. What you did wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. Michael lunged forward. You wouldn't dare. Actually, Marcus's voice came from the doorway as he entered with a team of lawyers she already has. I handed out folders to each family member. Inside, you'll find 2 options. Option 1. You repay every penny taken from my trust fund, with interest, and sign new agreements acknowledging your misconduct. Option 2. I press charges for fraud and embezzlement. You'd send your own family to jail, Aunt Patricia gasped. You tried to steal my house, I reminded her. After stealing my inheritance. After years of favoring Michael and dismissing my success. So yes, if necessary, I would. Dad flipped through the documents, his face ashen. These repayment terms. They're impossible. Not impossible, I corrected. Just difficult, like building a successful business from scratch, while your family undermines you at every turn. I moved to stand by the window, my window, in my house that I'd fought to keep. You have 24 hours to decide. Choose wisely. The next day, one by one, they came back, each signing the repayment agreements with varying degrees of resentment and shame. Michael was last, Emma notably absent. She called off the engagement, he said as he signed. Said she couldn't marry into a family with financial irregularities. Funny how karma works, I replied, not entirely unsympathetically. After they'd all left, I sat in my kitchen, the kitchen they'd tried to give away, and poured a glass of wine. My phone buzzed with a text from Grandma Aliner's old lawyer. Your grandmother would be proud. She always said you were the smart one. I smiled, remembering her words before she died. Don't let them dim your light, Sarah. Sometimes the biggest act of love is standing up for yourself. The following months brought changes. Mom and Dad downsized to meet their repayment obligations. Michael actually got a real job. The extended family learned to tread carefully around me, their whispered judgments replaced with reluctant respect. And me. I expanded my property company, launching a program to help single women become homeowners. Named it the Eleanor Reynolds Foundation in honor of the grandmother who'd believed in me when no one else did. 1 year later, I hosted a dinner party in my beautiful Victorian. Not for family, they were still working on understanding boundaries, but for the women in my foundation's program. As I watched them share stories and dreams, I realized something profound. Family isn't just about blood. Sometimes it's about finding people who respect your worth, who celebrate your success instead of trying to steal it. My phone buzzed. Mom asking if I'd join them for Sunday dinner. To try to heal, she wrote. I responded simply, maybe someday, when you're ready to see me as I am, not as who you tried to make me be. Then I turned back to my guests, raising my glass in a toast, to owning your power, I said, and never letting anyone take what's yours. The women cheered, their voices filling my home with the kind of warmth no family dinner had ever provided. Later that night, I stood in my garden, looking up at the house I'd fought so hard to keep. It wasn't just about the property anymore. It was about standing up for yourself, about showing the world and your family that you won't be bullied or diminished. Sometimes the biggest victory isn't in winning the fight, but in choosing to fight at all. And as I watched the sunset from my back porch, my house, my victory, I finally felt at peace. They tried to take everything from me, but in doing so, they'd given me something invaluable, the strength to stand alone. The dining room smelled of rosemary and pretension. Mom's antique crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, the one my sister Olivia had insisted they buy to upgrade the ambience. Everything about our monthly family dinners was designed to showcase success, or at least the appearance of it. I sat quietly, cutting my roast beef into precise squares while Olivia dominated the conversation. And then, she gushed, swirling her wine. James and I just fell in love with Unit 4B at the Mason. You know that luxury complex downtown? The views are absolutely incredible. Mom beamed. Oh, honey, that's wonderful. Those units are so exclusive. They are, Olivia preened. The waitlist is usually months long, but James knows people. She turned to me, her smile sharp as a paper cut. What about you, Sarah? Still in that little rental on Oak Street? I took a small sip of water. Yes, still there. Oh, her tone dripped with fake sympathy. Well, I suppose not everyone can afford to live somewhere nice. The Mason has such strict income requirements. She laughed, the sound like wind chimes made of ice. Poor thing, still paying rent at your age. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mom suddenly became very interested in her napkin, but Olivia wasn't done. You know, if you'd focused more on your career instead of all those investment courses you were always taking, maybe you could afford something better by now. I placed my fork down carefully. 10 years of calculated silence, of letting them believe what they wanted to believe, had led to this moment. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts with deliberate slowness. Actually, Olivia, speaking of the Mason, I hit dial and put the phone on speaker. The room filled with soft ringing. Hello, Ms. Anderson. How can I help you? Ms. Wilson's crisp professional voice carried clearly across the dinner table. Hi, Ms. Wilson. This is Sarah Anderson, the owner. I need you to prepare a notice for Unit 4B. Their lease won't be renewed next month. The silence that followed was absolute. Olivia's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Of course, Ms. Anderson. I'll prepare the paperwork right away. Would you like me to deliver it personally, or send it through mail? Personal delivery, please. Tomorrow morning would be perfect. Consider it done. Anything else? No, that's all. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. I ended the call and returned to my roast beef, taking another small, careful bite. The meat had gone cold, but I barely noticed. I was too busy watching the color drain from Olivia's face as realization dawned. You're lying, she stammered. This is some kind of joke. I reached into my bag and pulled out a slim leather portfolio. Inside was the deed to the Mason, along with quarterly revenue reports and tenant listings. I slid them across the table without a word. But how? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Remember all those investment courses you mocked? The ones that were wasting my time while Olivia was climbing the corporate ladder? I smiled slightly. Turns out they were quite useful. I bought the Mason 3 years ago through my holding company, along with 6 other properties in the city. Dad picked up the papers with trembling hands. These numbers, Sarah. This is... Yes, Dad. Your struggling daughter manages a real estate portfolio worth just over $40 million. I turned to Olivia, whose face had shifted from shock to something closer to horror. And yes, sis, the Mason does have very strict income requirements. Unfortunately, you and James fall just short of them for next year's lease terms. You can't do this, Olivia's voice cracked. We just finished decorating. We hosted a housewarming party last week. Actually, I can. It's my building. I stood up, smoothing my simple black dress. But don't worry. I hear there are some nice rentals available on Oak Street. Mom found her voice. Sarah, be reasonable. Your sister didn't mean. Yes, she did. I cut her off gently. She meant every word, every smirk, every subtle dig over the years. You all did. I picked up my bag, leaving the portfolio on the table. You were so busy looking down on me, you never bothered to look up and see what I was building. Please. Olivia's voice had shifted to something desperate. James' clients, our friends. We told everyone we'd be there for at least a year. I paused at the dining room door. You know what the funny thing is? If you'd ever once shown genuine interest in my life, asked about my work, treated me with basic respect, I would have given you that apartment for free. Family discount and all that. I glanced back one last time. But we're not really family, are we? We're just people who share DNA and a dining room once a month. The silence followed me out to my car, a modest Honda Civic that had been another source of their jokes. They didn't know about the Porsche in my private garage, or the beach house in Malibu, or the startup incubator I'd funded last year. They didn't know anything about me, really. And now, as I drove away from their perfectly manicured suburban life, I realized they never would, because I wasn't just the owner of their precious luxury apartment building. I was the owner of my own story. And for the first time in 10 years, I was finally letting myself tell it. My phone buzzed with texts, first from Olivia, then Mom, then Dad, each one more desperate than the last. I turned off the notifications and headed toward downtown, toward the Mason's gleaming glass tower, rising against the evening sky. My tower, my rules, my victory. Sometimes silence isn't just golden. Sometimes it's strategic. And sometimes, just sometimes, it builds empires while others are too busy judging to notice them rise. The next morning, I sat in my private office on the top floor of the Mason, watching the city wake up through floor-to-ceiling windows. The same windows Olivia had bragged about at countless social gatherings, never knowing her view was courtesy of her struggling sister. My intercom buzzed. Ms. Anderson? Ms. Wilson here. I've just delivered the notice to Unit 4B as requested. Thank you. How did they take it? Mr. James Davidson was quite vocal. He'd insisted on speaking with the owner directly. I smiled faintly. I'm sure he did. Please remind him that all communication needs to go through proper channels. Already done. Though, Ms. Wilson hesitated. There's something else. A woman is here to see you. Says she's your mother. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course. Mom always believed she could fix everything with a well-timed emotional appeal. Send her up. 3 minutes later, my office door opened. Mom stepped in, then stopped abruptly. I could see her taking in the space, the modern art on the walls, the custom desk, the view she praised so often in Olivia's apartment, not knowing an even better version existed just floors above. Sarah. She smoothed her designer blouse, clearly uncomfortable. This is quite an office. Thank you. Please sit. I gestured to one of the leather chairs facing my desk. She perched on the edge like she was afraid of settling in. Honey, we need to talk about what happened last night. Do we? You can't just evict your sister. Think about how this will look. I leaned back in my chair. Interesting. Your first concern is appearances, not the fact that your daughters haven't had a real conversation in years. That's not fair. We've always supported you. Have you? I opened my laptop, pulling up a folder I'd kept for years. Let's review, shall we? When I wanted to take that first real estate course, Dad called it throwing money away. When I started my investment company, you told everyone I was between jobs. When I missed Olivia's engagement party because I was closing my first major property deal, you said I was selfish and jealous of her success. We were worried about you. You were so secretive, never telling us anything. I tried. Every dinner, every holiday, I tried to share my work. But you were always too busy praising Olivia's latest promotion or James' new car or their perfect life in their perfect apartment. I closed the laptop softly. The apartment I own. Mom's face crumpled slightly. Why didn't you just tell us? Would you have believed me? Or would you have assumed I was lying to compete with Olivia? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. We both knew the truth. The notice stands, I said firmly. They have 30 days to find new accommodation. Sarah, please. Your sister is devastated. She had to call in sick to work today. James is threatening to. To what? Sue? He's welcome to try. Every lease agreement is ironclad, and I have documentation of 3 noise complaints against their unit in the past month alone. Mom's eyes widened. You've been monitoring them? I monitor all my properties. It's called being a responsible owner. I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with my development team about our new project in Seattle. Seattle? She looked lost. You're expanding there too? Among other places. I walked to the door, holding it open. You know, Mom, all those times you and Dad pushed me to be more like Olivia, to follow her path. Did you ever consider that I was building something bigger than a corner office and a luxury apartment? She stopped in the doorway, turning to face me. We just wanted you to be successful. I am successful. You just defined success too narrowly to see it. After she left, I walked to the window, watching her expensive car pull away from the curb. My phone buzzed, a text from Olivia. This is cruel, even for you. I typed back. No, cruel is 10 years of subtle digs and public humiliation. This is just business. Another buzz. Mom says you have properties in Seattle now. What else are you hiding? I smiled but didn't respond. Let her wonder. Let them all wonder. Ms. Wilson's voice came through the intercom again. Ms. Anderson? The development team is ready for you in the conference room. Thank you. Oh, and Ms. Wilson? Please start compiling listings for available units in the building. Similar size to 4B, but perhaps with slightly less desirable views. For your sister? No. For the 3 families on our waiting list who actually meet our income requirements, it's time to maintain some standards around here. As I gathered my materials for the meeting, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked different somehow, stronger, clearer, more myself than I'd ever been at those suffocating family dinners. My phone buzzed again. Dad, this time, we should talk. Over dinner, maybe? Your choice of restaurant. I left it unanswered. They'd had 10 years of dinners to talk to me, to see me, to understand what I was building. Now they could wait, because the empire I'd built in silence. It was just the beginning, and this time, I wouldn't be quiet about it. The next week unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of consequences. I sat in my home office, not the modest Oak Street apartment they knew about, but my actual residence, a restored Victorian mansion in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, reviewing the security footage from the Mason. Olivia had shown up every day, alternating between demands and pleas with Ms. Wilson. James had tried legal threats, then bribes, then finally resorted to leaving desperate voicemails about family obligations. I watched it all with a detached sort of fascination, like observing specimens in a lab. Then came the email that changed everything. Ms. Anderson, I represent the Davidson family's interests in several commercial properties downtown. We've recently learned you're the owner of the Mason. I believe we could turn this unfortunate situation into a mutually beneficial opportunity. Perhaps we could discuss over lunch. Best regards, Marcus Sterling, Senior Partner, Sterling and Associates. I laughed quietly. James' father's law firm. Of course. They still thought this was a negotiation. I typed a brief response. Mr. Sterling? Thank you for your interest. However, I should inform you that the Mason is just one of 17 properties in my portfolio. This includes the building where Sterling and Associates currently leases its offices. Your lease is up for renewal next quarter. I look forward to reviewing your firm's application along with other potential tenants. Best, Sarah Anderson, CEO, Anderson Holdings. I hit send and waited. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Olivia. You own the Sterling building too? Her voice shook. Sarah, what are you? A good investor? Something none of you ever bothered to understand. James' father is furious. He's talking about blacklisting you in real estate circles. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Interesting threat. Has he checked who owns the properties housing the city's top 3 law firms? Or the new tech complex where his biggest clients are headquartered? Silence. Then, how? How much do you actually own? Enough to ensure that blacklisting me would be problematic for many influential people. I paused. Including Dad's engineering firm. Their building lease is under review too, by the way. Dad's office? Her voice cracked. Sarah, you can't. Can't what? Make business decisions about my properties? Isn't that what you and James do? What Mom and Dad praised you for? Being tough and business-minded. More silence. Then softly, what do you want? Want? I looked out my window at the city skyline, my skyline, in many ways. I want what I've always wanted. Recognition, respect. A family that sees me for who I am, not who they assumed I'd be. By destroying us? No, Olivia. By showing you who I've become while you were too busy looking down to look up. I sighed. Check your email in an hour. You'll find a list of available properties within your actual budget. Not as prestigious as the Mason, but decent. Consider it a professional courtesy. That's it? That's all you have to say? No. I stood, walking to my wall of achievements, awards, recognitions, magazine covers featuring my properties, all collected over years of work they dismissed as wasting time. I also want you to explain to Mom and Dad why their perfect daughter and son-in-law are moving to a lesser address. Tell them the truth. All of it, including how you treated the sister who could have been your biggest ally. I ended the call and pressed my intercom. Ms. Wilson, please prepare the paperwork for Unit 4B's new tenants, the Thompson family, the ones with the 2 kids in medical school. They meet all requirements and their reference checks are impeccable. Right away, Ms. Anderson. Oh, and the Seattle development team sent over the final proposals. They're quite impressive. Thank you. I'll review them this afternoon. I sat back down, opening my laptop to check the latest property acquisitions. A notification popped up. Another email from Mom. Sarah, your father and I have been doing some research. The properties, the investments, the scale of what you've built. We had no idea. No idea at all. We failed you. Not in the way we thought. Worrying you weren't successful enough, but by not seeing how extraordinary you actually are. If you're willing, we'd like to learn about your work, your companies, everything we should have asked about years ago, not to benefit from it, but to understand our daughter. Love. Mom. I read it twice, then pulled up my calendar. After a moment's consideration, I blocked off next Thursday evening and typed, dinner at 7, my office, come ready to listen. Sarah. Then I turned back to my work, to the empire I'd built in silence, to the future I was still creating. Because success isn't just about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. And sometimes the quietest builder creates the tallest towers. Mom's response came quickly. We'll be there. And Sarah? We're proud of you. We should have said that years ago. I didn't reply. They'd need to prove it with more than words this time. But as I looked out at my city, at the buildings bearing my invisible fingerprints, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the foundation of something new. Sometimes the best revenge isn't serving it cold, it's serving it with a side of enlightenment. And as the sun set over my skyline, I smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring another day of building, growing, and rising. Not in silence anymore, but in the clear, bright light of truth. Because I wasn't just Sarah Anderson, the overlooked sister. I was Sarah Anderson, CEO, property mogul, empire builder. And finally, everyone knew it.
The crystal chandeliers of Lou Maison cast elegant shadows across white tablecloths as I adjusted my simple black blazer, a deliberate choice from my plain poor wardrobe. Victoria, my older sister, held court at the center table, her Chanel suit and perfect highlights screaming old money to her wealthy clients. I watched her lean in, that familiar conspiratorial smile playing across her lips as she stage whispered about her struggling sister. I'm Olivia Thorne, though my family prefers to call me Liv, diminutive, like everything else they think about me. At 34, I'm supposedly the family disappointment, the cautionary tale Victoria loves to share with her investment clients. Poor Liv, she'd say, still living off her savings, couldn't hack it in finance. If they only knew those savings were worth $4.2 billion as of this morning's market opening. Liv, darling, Victoria's voice carried that precise mix of pity and condescension she'd perfected over years of practice. So glad you could join us. Though. She glanced meaningfully at my off-the-rack blazer. You really should have mentioned it was at Lou Maison. You could have borrowed something more appropriate. I took my assigned seat, the one furthest from her important clients, of course. The blazer's comfortable, I replied, watching her wince at such a pedestrian consideration as comfort. "This is Harrison Blake," Victoria gestured to the distinguished-looking man beside her. "He's considering having our firm manage his technology portfolio." Her emphasis on "our" made it clear which sister she meant. "Harrison, this is my sister Liv. She used to work in finance too before I decided corporate life wasn't for me," I finished smoothly, accepting the wine list from the sommelier. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. She'd been hoping I'd let her finish the story about my supposed burnout and breakdown. "Ah yes," Harrison smiled politely. "Victoria mentioned you're between opportunities right now. Must be difficult in this economy." I caught the sommelier's eye. "The Chateau Lafite Rothschild 1982, please." Victoria's perfect eyebrows shot up. "That bottle cost more than what she thought I made in a month." "Put it on my usual account, Jean-Marc." "Of course, Miss Thorne. Your regular table is available if you'd prefer." "This is fine for tonight," I cut in smoothly, watching Victoria's expression shift from surprise to suspicion. She'd never seen me here before, yet the staff clearly knew me well. "Liv," she hissed once Jean-Marc left, "you can't afford that wine. I'll have to cover it." "Actually," Harrison interrupted, studying me with new interest, "did you say Thorne? Not Olivia Thorne?" Victoria laughed, that silvery social laugh she used to smooth over awkward moments. "Yes, that's her name, but of Phoenix Capital?" Harrison continued, his focus entirely on me now. "The same Olivia Thorne who just acquired Microtech Solutions." The silence that fell over the table was absolute. Victoria's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Her junior associate nearly dropped his phone. And Harrison Blake, one of her biggest potential clients, was looking at me like he'd just discovered gold. "Microtech was undervalued," I said simply. "Their AI division alone was worth twice the market cap." "That was a $3 billion acquisition," Harrison said slowly. "Cash offer if I remember correctly." Victoria's face had gone from cream to paper white. "There must be some mistake," she managed. "Liv works from her apartment. She barely makes ends meet. She runs one of the most successful private equity firms in the country," Harrison finished. "I can't believe I didn't recognize you immediately. Your hostile takeover of Bennett Industries last year was brilliant." I smiled, remembering that deal. Victoria had spent weeks mocking my unemployed status during that acquisition, never realizing I was the anonymous buyer dismantling her client's company piece by piece. You're not." Victoria stuttered, her perfect composure cracking. "Between opportunities?" I supplied helpfully. "No, I'd say I'm exactly where I plan to be." I turned to Harrison. "Though I should mention I've had my eye on Blake Technologies for a while. Your quantum computing patents are particularly interesting." Harrison's eyes widened. "We're not for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price," I replied, accepting the wine as Jean-Marc returned. "By the way, Victoria, don't worry about the wine. I own the restaurant. Have since last year." Victoria's hands were trembling now. The careful narrative she'd built about her failure of a sister was crumbling in front of her most important client. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "You never asked," I said simply. "Too busy telling everyone how I couldn't handle the pressure, how I was living off dwindling savings. It's amazing how much you can accomplish when people underestimate you." Harrison was already pulling out his business card. "I'd love to discuss those patents further, Miss Thorne. Perhaps a private meeting." Of course, I took the card, knowing it would cost Victoria her biggest potential client. "I have an opening tomorrow at my office. The one in the building I bought from Victoria's firm last month. They don't know that yet, but the announcement goes out in the morning." Victoria knocked over her water glass. "The Madison building? But that's our headquarters." "Was your headquarters," I corrected gently. "Amazing how many properties you can acquire when your own sister tells everyone you're unemployed. No one even thought to check who was behind the holding company making the offers." The rest of dinner passed in a blur of revelations. Every dismissive story Victoria had ever told about me was unraveling. Every client at the table was suddenly realizing they were dining with someone far more powerful than their wealth manager. As coffee was served, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I smiled, turning the screen toward Victoria. "Oh look, Forbes just released their 40 under 40 list. Guess who made the cover?" She stared at my photo at the headline declaring me, investment's new queen, and something finally broke. All this time, she whispered. Every dinner where I pitied you, every client I told about my poor struggling sister, was free advertising, I finished. Nothing makes people underestimate you quite like family convinced of your failure. I stood, straightening my deliberately modest blazer. Harrison, I'll have my office send over the acquisition paperwork in the morning. Victoria, you might want to start looking for new office space. I hear rents are quite high these days. As I walked out of La Maison, my phone buzzed again. A message from our mother. Victoria just called in tears. What did you do? I smiled, typing back. Nothing much. Just showed her that sometimes the biggest success stories are written in silence. Tomorrow the full scope of my empire would become public. The acquisitions, the properties, the companies I'd built while my family dismissed me as a failure. But tonight, watching Victoria's perfect world crumble over a bottle of wine I owned, was satisfaction enough. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's letting them realize they never really knew you at all. The morning after my dinner with Victoria brought exactly the chaos I'd expected. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. Texts, calls, emails, all from family members who'd suddenly discovered they had a billionaire relative. I sat in my real office, not the modest co-working space my family thought I used, but the entire top floor of the Phoenix Capitol building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a perfect view of the city I'd been quietly reshaping for the past 5 years. Your sister's been in the lobby for an hour, Maya, my executive assistant, announced. Security says she's tried 3 different names to get past reception. I glanced at the security feed. Victoria looked decidedly less polished than usual. Her designer suit was slightly wrinkled, her perfect hair showing signs of a sleepless night. The Madison Building announcement must have hit. Your mother's called 6 times, Maya continued. Your father's trying to reach you through LinkedIn, and your cousin Sarah's already updated her profile to mention her close family connection to Phoenix Capitol's CEO. I smiled, opening my laptop to review the morning's news. Phoenix Capitol acquires Madison Building in surprise move. Olivia Thorne, the silent billionaire. Investment's hidden queen. How one woman built an empire in secret. My phone buzzed again. A text from Harrison Blake. Impressive press. When can we discuss those patents? Before I could reply, Maya's voice came through the intercom. Your brother Thomas is here. He's with your father. That was unexpected. Thomas usually avoided family drama, preferring to stay neutral in his role as a mid-level manager at our father's consulting firm. Send them up. They entered like men approaching a stranger's territory, which in a way they were. Dad's eyes swept the office, taking in the pristine modern design, the wall of business awards, the view that proved just how high his youngest daughter had climbed. Quite an office, he managed finally. Better than this sad little apartment you said I should be embarrassed to work from? I kept my voice neutral, remembering last Christmas when he'd lectured me about wasting my potential. Olivia, Thomas stepped forward. We need to talk about Victoria. Of course. They weren't here to apologize or understand. They were here to manage the family crisis. She's destroyed, Thomas continued. The Madison Building was her biggest client portfolio. Without it, she'll have to actually earn her success instead of riding on client connections and family names? I supplied. You could have warned us, Dad burst out. All these years watching us worry about you, letting us think. Letting you think exactly what you wanted to think. I cut in. When did any of you actually ask about my work? My goals? My dreams? Victoria was too busy using me as her cautionary tale. You were too convinced I'd failed by choosing my own path. But billions. Dad sank into one of my visitor chairs. How did we not know? I walked to my window, looking out at the Madison Building where Victoria's firm would soon be vacating. Remember when I left Harrison Corp 5 years ago? When Victoria told everyone I'd had a breakdown? They nodded. That story had become family legend. Poor Liv couldn't handle the pressure, ran away from a promising career. I left because I saw an opportunity everyone else missed. Tech companies were undervalued, ripe for acquisition. But I knew how this family operates. If I'd announced my plans, you'd have tried to control everything. Direct my investments. Manage my choices. Just like you always had. We were trying to help, Dad protested. No, I turned back to face them. You were trying to control. So I let you think I'd failed. Used my trust fund as seed money, lived modestly, worked in secret. Every time Victoria mocked my little apartment, she had no idea I owned the building. Every time you lectured me about responsibility, I was closing million-dollar deals. And now? Thomas asked quietly. Why reveal everything now? I smiled, picking up a folder from my desk. Because now I'm fully positioned. Every property, every acquisition, every piece exactly where I need it to be. I handed him the folder. Including Dad's company. Dad stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled. What? Phoenix Ventures, the holding company that's been buying shares in your consulting firm for the past year? That's me. As of this morning, I own 51% of Thorn Consulting. Thomas opened the folder, scanning the documents with growing disbelief. She's right, Dad. She's majority shareholder. You can't. Dad started. Can't what? Run the company better than you? The same way I couldn't handle finance? Couldn't manage my own career? Couldn't be trusted to make my own choices. My phone buzzed, Maya's message flashed. Victoria's trying the service entrance now. If you'll excuse me, I gathered some papers. I have a meeting with Harrison Blake about acquiring his tech patents. When, Dad? The board meets tomorrow at 9. I expect you'll want to prepare your retirement announcement. Retirement? His face flushed. You can't force me out of my own company. Actually, I can. And I will. Consider it a lesson in consequences. Now, if you'll have security escort you out, I believe my sister's about to make her third attempt to breach the building. As they left, Thomas paused at the door. For what it's worth, he said quietly. I always knew you were smarter than they gave you credit for. I just never imagined. No one did, I replied. That was rather the point. After they left, I buzzed Maya. Hold my calls unless it's Harrison Blake. And Maya? Send flowers to Victoria at the Madison Building. White lilies. Card should read, sometimes the best success stories are written in silence. I turned back to my window watching Dad and Thomas exit the building. My phone buzzed again, a message from our mother. Family dinner. Tonight. We need to discuss this as a family. I typed back. Can't make it. Board meeting prep. But feel free to discuss my billions without me. You've had plenty of practice discussing my failures. Because this was just the beginning. Victoria's client exodus was about to start. Dad's retirement would shake the consulting industry. And my family? They were about to learn that sometimes the person they wrote off as a failure was actually writing their ending. The boardroom of Thorn Consulting looked exactly as I remembered it from childhood, all dark wood and leather chairs, designed to intimidate. I'd spent countless hours here as a girl, watching my father command his empire while telling me I wasn't cut out for real business. Now at 8:55 a.m. I sat in his chair, reviewing the documents that would reshape our family legacy forever. The other board members filed in slowly, their usual confidence replaced by uncertain glances and whispered conversations. They'd all received the morning's press packet, complete details of Phoenix Capital's acquisition, my father's retirement, and the company's new direction. Dad entered last, Victoria surprisingly at his side. They'd clearly coordinated their attack. Both wore power suits and matching expressions of righteous indignation. This is ridiculous, Dad announced before even sitting down. You can't just walk in and take over. Actually, I cut in smoothly. I walked in months ago. You just didn't notice because you were too busy dismissing me. I nodded to my legal team. Please distribute the voting records. Victoria grabbed her copy, manicured fingers trembling slightly. These are fake. They have to be. Like my supposed breakdown was fake? I raised an eyebrow. Or my alleged failure. No, sister dear, these are quite real. Every share purchase, every proxy vote, all perfectly legal and verified. You've been planning this. Dad's face had gone from red to pale. All those family dinners where you let us lecture you were excellent opportunities to gauge the company's weaknesses, I confirmed. Amazing what people reveal when they think they're talking to someone who doesn't matter. The boardroom door opened again. Harrison Blake walked in, followed by 3 other major clients Victoria had been courting. Her face went from pale to ashen. Harrison, she started, we had a meeting scheduled for. With Phoenix Capital, he finished. Which, as we now know, means with your sister. He took a seat beside me. The patents we discussed last night, Olivia. I'm ready to proceed. Victoria's Mont Blanc pen snapped in her grip, leaving a blue stain on her pristine white cuff. Those were my clients, she whispered. We're being the operative word, I agreed. Just like this was Dad's company. Things change. Especially when you spend years underestimating the wrong person. I stood, straightening my designer suit. No more playing poor. No more hiding my success. Let me be clear about what happens next. Dad, you'll announce your retirement effective immediately. Victoria, your position as head of client relations is terminated. The rest of the board can either adapt to new leadership or tender their resignations. You can't. Dad started again, but I held up my hand. Actually, I can. And I have. But here's what's interesting, I didn't have to. I clicked a remote, bringing up financial projections on the wall screen. The company's been mismanaged for years. Client retention is down 40%. Innovation is stagnant. You've been coasting on old relationships while the market evolved. The board members shifted uncomfortably. They'd known this but had been too afraid to challenge my father. In the past 6 hours, I continued, Phoenix Capital has received 14 inquiries from major clients looking to transfer their business. Apparently, they prefer working with the sister who built a billion-dollar empire in secret over the one who spent her time mocking others' failures. Victoria stood abruptly. This is about revenge. About making us pay for not believing in you. No, I said quietly. This is about business. You taught me that, remember? All those times you told clients about your pathetic little sister? Well, now they know which sister they should have been watching. My phone buzzed, a message from Maya. Your mother's here with your Aunt Patricia. Perfect timing. Send them in, I instructed through the intercom. Mom burst through the door, Aunt Patricia right behind her. They froze at the sight of the assembled board, the clients, the clear shift in power dynamics. Olivia, Mom started, her society smile wavering. Darling, this has gone far enough. We're family. Funny, I interrupted. We weren't family when you let Victoria spread rumors about my mental health. We weren't family when you excluded me from events because I was embarrassing. We weren't family last month when you all laughed about my sad little startup at Sunday dinner. I clicked through to the next slide. Phoenix Capital's complete portfolio. Properties, companies, investments spanning 6 continents. We're only family now because I'm worth billions. And that's exactly why this company needs new leadership. The board won't stand for this. Dad tried one last time. The board already has. I nodded to Harrison, who produced another folder. As of this morning, he announced, Phoenix Capital has voting agreements with 82% of shareholders. This transition is happening, Robert. The only question is whether you'll retire gracefully or be removed. Dad slumped in his chair, decades of authority draining away. Victoria's perfect makeup couldn't hide her tears. And Mom just stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. In a way she was. Maya will show you out, I said calmly. Your retirement package is generous, Dad. Victoria, your severance will be fair. Consider it a lesson in the danger of underestimating people. As security arrived to escort them out, I turned to the remaining board members. Now, shall we discuss the company's future? I have some thoughts on modernization. Later that evening, I sat in my office reviewing the day's press coverage. The business world was buzzing about the silent billionaire who'd orchestrated one of the most elegant corporate takeovers in recent history. Victoria's client list had already started defecting to Phoenix Capital. Dad's retirement announcement was drafted and scheduled for morning release. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Always knew you were the smartest one in the family. I smiled, remembering all the family dinners where they'd dismissed my potential. All the celebrations I'd attended in simple clothes, letting them think I couldn't afford better. All the times Victoria had used me as her cautionary tale. Maya appeared in my doorway. Your mother's called 6 more times. Victoria's sent 4 emails asking to explain her side. And your father has finally learned what real business looks like, I finished. Hold all their calls. They've had years to talk. Now it's my turn. I turned to my window, watching the city lights flicker on. Somewhere out there, my family was realizing that success doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it builds in silence, growing stronger in the shadows of others' doubt. And sometimes, the sister they dismissed as a failure was actually writing their ending all along. Because revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about showing people exactly who you've become while they were busy underestimating you. I picked up my phone and typed one final message to our family group chat. Next family dinner will be in my boardroom. Dress appropriately. After all, we have a new hierarchy to discuss. Then I turned back to my empire, the one I'd built in silence while they counted my failures. Because sometimes the best success stories are written by the people no one thought to watch. And I was just getting started. The sound of sterling silver against fine china echoed through our family's dining room as my father set down his fork with calculated precision. That sound always preceded a lecture. I'd learned to recognize it years ago. Daniel, he began, using my full name rather than Dan, another warning sign. Your mother and I have been patient. But it's time to have a serious discussion about your hobby. I suppressed a smile, taking another bite of my mother's roast beef. Hobby. That's what they called my technology company, the one currently finalizing a $4 billion IPO. Not that they knew that part. Yet. You're 32, my father continued, glancing at my simple button-down shirt and khakis, deliberately chosen to maintain their perception of my struggling entrepreneur status. Mark's youngest boy just made partner at Goldman. The Andersons' daughter is chief surgeon now. And you're still playing with computers, my sister Jessica finished, not bothering to hide her smirk. She sat across from me in her perfectly tailored Chanel suit, every inch the successful corporate lawyer they'd always wanted me to be. My mother reached across to pat my hand, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. We just worry, darling. All those hours in that tiny office space barely making ends meet. There's no shame in admitting it's time for a real career. If they only knew that tiny office space was actually just my private thinking room in my company's 50-story downtown headquarters. The consulting firm has an opening, my father added. Senior analyst position. Robert owes me a favor. I could make a call. I took a sip of water, remembering the irony that I now owned the building his consulting firm operated from, through one of my holding companies. Thanks, Dad, but I'm good with what I'm doing. Jessica rolled her eyes. Good? You live in that starter apartment, drive a 5-year-old Volvo, and work insane hours on some app that nobody's ever heard of. If she only knew that nobody included half the Fortune 500 companies now using my software. Or that the starter apartment was actually the smallest unit I kept in a building I owned, just to maintain appearances. Actually, my mother brightened, Caroline Mitchell's son is looking for a roommate in the city. Much better neighborhood than your current situation. Maybe if you shared expenses. Caroline Mitchell's son? I couldn't help but laugh. The one who tried to launch 3 failed startups using daddy's money. At least he tried something legitimate. My father cut in. Not this secretive project you won't even explain properly. I've explained it, I said calmly. We develop enterprise software solutions for. Stop, Jessica held up her hand. Nobody wants to hear the tech babble. The point is, you're wasting your Stanford degree on some pipe dream. My mother's iPad chimed softly, her evening news alerts. She reached for it absently, probably checking the society pages she obsessed over. You had such promise, my father continued. Top of your class, offers from every major tech firm. Instead you chose to hole up in that office working on this. He waved his hand dismissively, startup fantasy. My watch showed 7 p.m. exactly. Right on schedule. Speaking of which, Jessica leaned forward, how are you affording rent these days? Those savings must be running pretty low. If you need a loan. Oh my God. My mother's shriek cut through the dining room. Her iPad clattered against her water glass, screen facing up. There, in crisp high definition, was my face. Above it, the Forbes logo. Below, the headline, Tech's newest billionaire. How Daniel Carter built a $4 billion empire in secret. The silence that followed was absolutely perfect. Jessica's fork slipped from her fingers, clattering against fine china. My father's face went from confident lecture to stunned disbelief in seconds. And my mother, she just kept looking between me and the iPad, mouth opening and closing without sound. What is this? My father finally managed. I pulled out my phone, checking the notifications already flooding in. That would be Forbes' early release of tomorrow's cover story. They're announcing their 40 under 40 list. Looks like I made the cover. Billionaire. Jessica whispered, grabbing the iPad. This has to be a mistake. Your little software company. Nova Technologies, I supplied helpfully. Currently valued at $4.2 billion pre-IPO. Though that number's probably conservative given the latest contracts. My mother's hand flew to her throat. But you live in that tiny apartment. 1 unit in a building I own, I corrected. Along with about 30 other properties across the city. Amazing what you can acquire when everyone thinks you're struggling. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping against hardwood. You've been lying to us. No, I said calmly. I've been succeeding. You just never bothered to understand what that looked like. I pulled out my own tablet, bringing up the company overview that would be released to the press tomorrow. Nova Technologies provides enterprise software to 60% of Fortune 500 companies. Our AI division is revolutionizing data processing. That tiny office you mock? It's actually a 100,000 square foot campus downtown. The building with the blue glass tower? Jessica's voice cracked. That's mine, I nodded. Along with the one housing your law firm, actually. Bought it last year through a holding company. Surprise. My mother was still staring at the Forbes article, scrolling frantically. 4th youngest self-made billionaire. Revolutionary software design. Pioneering artificial intelligence. Daniel, why didn't you tell us? I leaned back, studying their shocked faces. Would you have believed me? Or would you have tried to control it, shape it, turn it into your version of success? My phone buzzed, messages already pouring in from relatives who'd seen the Forbes piece. Distant cousins suddenly remembering our close connection. Aunts and uncles who'd mocked my career choice now eager to reconnect. All this time, my father said slowly, while we lectured you about real jobs. I was building something bigger than you could imagine, I finished. But you were too busy pushing consulting careers and law firms to notice. Jessica was on her phone now, probably Googling me frantically. There's more, she whispered. Business Insider, Wall Street Journal. They're all running stories. Tech's hidden giant. The billionaire next door. Dan, how did we not know? I stood, straightening my deliberately modest clothes. Because you saw what you wanted to see. The struggling younger sibling. The son who wouldn't follow the conventional path. The startup that couldn't possibly succeed. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from my actual office. The IPO paperwork was ready for final review. If you'll excuse me, I gathered my things. I have an early morning tomorrow. Going public tends to involve a lot of meetings. Going public? My father seemed to be having trouble processing each new revelation. NYSE opening bell, I confirmed. You can watch it on CNBC. Though, I smiled slightly, you might want to update your stock portfolio first. Nova Technologies will be trading under NVT. As I walked toward the door, my mother finally found her voice. Wait. Next Sunday's dinner. Will you? Can't make it, I called back. Board meeting in Tokyo. But feel free to discuss my career choices without me. You've had plenty of practice. I paused at the threshold, turning back one last time. Oh, and Dad? About that consulting firm you wanted me to join? They might be looking for a new building soon. I'm raising their rent next quarter. The sound of my mother dropping her wine glass followed me out. Sometimes success doesn't need to announce itself. Sometimes it just needs to wait for the perfect moment to be revealed. And thanks to Forbes' impeccable timing, my moment had finally arrived. The morning after Forbes shattered my family's illusions, I sat in my actual office, the entire top floor of the Nova Technologies tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a perfect view of the city skyline, including the consulting firm building where my father was probably still trying to process last night's revelations. Your sister's been calling every hour since 6 a.m., my executive assistant Kate announced. Your parents have tried the main office line 14 times, and your mother's posted 3 times on LinkedIn about her brilliant entrepreneurial son. I smiled, scanning the morning's headlines on my digital wall. Nova Technologies, the stealth giant going public. Daniel Carter, Tech's secret billionaire. Inside the mind of software's hidden genius. The Today Show wants an exclusive, Kate continued. CNN's been calling and your high school just reached out about giving a commencement speech. The same high school where the guidance counselor told me to be more realistic about my future? I raised an eyebrow. How interesting. My phone buzzed, a text from Jessica. We need to talk. Family meeting at parents' house tonight. Non-negotiable. Before I could respond, Kate's voice came through the intercom. Your father's in the lobby. He's demanding to see you. I checked the security feed. There he stood in his finest suit, looking significantly less commanding than he had during last night's lecture. Send him up. And Kate? Pull up the consulting firm's lease agreement. Minutes later, my father entered my office, his confidence faltering as he took in the space. The modern design, the technology, the clear symbols of power he'd never noticed his son accumulating. Quite a view, he managed finally. Better than the tiny office you imagined I worked from? I kept my voice neutral, remembering his countless dismissive comments. Daniel, he stepped forward, we need to discuss what you've done. Built a multi-billion-dollar company? Revolutionized enterprise software? Or successfully hidden it all from a family too busy criticizing me to notice? He sank into one of my visitor chairs, Italian leather worth more than his monthly salary. Why the deception? We're your family. Are we? I turned to face him fully. Because family usually supports each other. Instead, you and Mom spent years pushing me toward paths I never wanted. Jessica mocked every decision I made. You all treated my work like some phase I needed to outgrow. We were worried about you. No, I corrected. You were worried about appearances. About what the country club crowd thought. About maintaining your image of success. I pulled up the consulting firm's lease on my screen. Speaking of success, let's discuss your office building. Rents increasing by 40% next quarter. His face paled. You can't. The firm can't afford that. Should have read the lease terms more carefully, I replied. Or better yet, should have paid attention when your son was building an empire right under your nose. My phone buzzed, another message from Jessica. Dad's gone to talk sense into you. Don't do anything rash. Too late, I murmured, then addressed my father. The IPO bell rings in 2 hours. I have meetings to prepare for. Kate will show you out. Daniel, please. He stood, straightening his shoulders like he used to when laying down the law during my childhood. We're trying to understand. No, you're trying to regain control, I cut in. But that power dynamic ended the moment Forbes hit publish. I'm not the son who needs your career advice anymore. I'm the CEO taking his company public at a $4 billion valuation. Kate appeared at the door. Your executive team is ready for the pre-IPO briefing, Mr. Carter. Thank you, Kate. I turned back to my father. Give Mom my best. And Dad? About that analyst position you offered? I just acquired the consulting firm that was hiring. Another subsidiary you never noticed I owned. As security escorted him out, my phone lit up with a message from my mother. Darling, I've invited the Mitchells for dinner tonight. Their son would love to discuss potential collaborations. I laughed, typing back, can't make it. Too busy being successful without the family connections you never thought I needed. Because this was just the beginning. The IPO would cement my public success. The real estate holdings would reshape downtown. And my family? They were about to learn that sometimes the child they tried to control had been controlling everything all along. The New York Stock Exchange's trading floor hummed with anticipation. Reporters jostled for position. Cameras trained on the opening bell platform where I stood in a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, no more playing down my success. 5 minutes to bell, Kate murmured beside me. Your family just arrived. I glanced toward the visitors' gallery. There they were, my parents, Jessica, even Caroline Mitchell and her startup expert son, all dressed like they'd planned to be here all along. Mother was already networking, probably telling everyone how she'd always believed in my vision. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. We need to talk after this. Family dinner tonight. Non-negotiable. I smiled, typing back. Actually, it is negotiable. Board meeting in an hour. Acquiring another company. Maybe one you've heard of. The trading floor screens lit up with Nova Technologies stats. Expected opening price. $175. Projected market cap. $4.8 billion. Pre-market trading already indicated we'd blow past those estimates. Mr. Carter, a CNBC reporter approached, microphone ready. Your family must be so proud. Did they always support your entrepreneurial dreams? I caught my father's flinch in the gallery. Actually, I replied loud enough to carry, I built this company while they told me to get a real job. Sometimes the best motivation comes from proving people wrong. Mother's perfectly maintained smile cracked slightly. Jessica's phone nearly slipped from her manicured fingers. 30 seconds, Kate announced. I stepped to the Bell platform, remembering all the Sunday dinners where they'd lectured me about wasting my potential. All the family events where they'd introduced me as their still finding himself son. All the times Jessica had mocked my little computer project. 10 seconds. The screens began the countdown. In the gallery, Caroline Mitchell's son, the one my mother had suggested as a roommate to save money, was frantically Googling my company on his phone. The bell rang. Nova Technologies, NVT, opened at $225, jumped to $280 within minutes. The trading floor erupted. Somewhere in the gallery, my mother was probably calculating how to work this into her country club conversations. Mr. Carter. Reporters swarmed. How does it feel to become one of the youngest tech billionaires? Your net worth just crossed $5 billion. Any plans to slow down? Will you be moving from your modest apartment now? I smiled, adjusting my custom Patek Philippe watch, the one I'd worn under cheap shirt sleeves for years. Actually, that apartment was just for show. Like most successful people, I learned the value of letting others underestimate you. Kate appeared at my elbow. Board meeting in 20. And your mother's trying to arrange a family celebration dinner at Le Cirque. Tell her I'm busy, I replied. But she might want to check who owns Le Cirque now. Acquired it last month through a subsidiary. The trading screens showed NVT hitting $300. My phone buzzed constantly, distant relatives, old classmates, former critics all trying to connect. A message from Jessica caught my eye. The law firm's managing partner just called an emergency meeting. Something about building ownership. I smirked, remembering the acquisition papers I'd signed yesterday. Better hurry to that meeting, sis. Your firm's about to learn who their new landlord is. As security cleared a path through the reporters, I caught sight of my father on his phone, probably calling his consulting firm about their lease. He'd soon discover they had new ownership too. Your parents are trying to reach the executive suite, Kate reported. Of course they are. I straightened my tie. Time to show them what their struggling son actually built. The Nova Technologies executive floor occupied the top 3 levels of our headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows, state-of-the-art everything, and a view that dominated the city. My family stood in the reception area trying to look like they belonged. Beautiful office. Mother attempted her society smile. Though perhaps a bit excessive? Like your attempts to control my life? I replied pleasantly. Or Jessica's weekly mockery of my career choices? Now Daniel, father stepped forward, we should discuss this as a family. Family. I laughed softly. We're only family now because Forbes made me a billionaire. Funny how that works. I walked to my window wall, looking down at the city I'd quietly reshaped while they thought I was failing. The consulting firm you wanted me to join? I own it now. Jessica's law firm building? Even that startup incubator space Caroline's son keeps failing in, I acquired it last week. But why? Mother whispered. Because you taught me an important lesson. I turned back to face them. Success isn't about following others' paths. It's about building your own, even if you have to do it in secret while your family undermines you. Jessica stepped forward, her legal training kicking in. The firm's lease is being terminated, I finished. Consider it severance for all those times you called my company a hobby. You can't just. Father started. Actually, I can. And I am. I pressed a button, and my digital wall displayed Nova Technologies' full portfolio. While you were pitying my struggling startup, I was building this. Every property, every acquisition, every success you were too busy judging me to notice. The stock ticker caught everyone's eye, NVT passing $350. Now, I checked my watch. I have a board meeting. We're discussing which companies to acquire next. Kate will show you out. Wait, Mother reached for my arm. The Mitchells are hosting a celebration dinner tonight. Everyone will be there. Everyone who mocked me? I raised an eyebrow. Everyone who dismissed my dreams. No thanks. I have a private jet waiting. Tokyo office needs attention. Private jet? Jessica whispered. One of 4, I confirmed. Though you probably missed that detail while telling everyone about your struggling brother who needed a roommate. As security arrived to escort them out, Father turned back. Son, please. We can fix this. No need, I smiled. I already fixed it. Built a billion-dollar company, reshaped the city's skyline, and proved every doubt wrong. But hey, at least now you have something impressive to share at country club dinners. After they left, Kate brought in the afternoon reports. Stock stabilized at $365. You're trending on Twitter. And your mother's already updated her Instagram bio to mention her tech pioneer son. I laughed, remembering all the times she'd avoided mentioning my career at social events. Let her. Success is the best revenge, especially when it comes with a corner office they never thought you'd have. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from Jessica. Family dinner next Sunday. Please. We need to make this right. I typed back, can't make it. Too busy running the empire you said I'd never build. But feel free to discuss my success without me, you've had plenty of practice discussing my failures. Looking out over my city, watching the sun set behind buildings I owned, I smiled. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's succeeding so spectacularly that they have to live with knowing how wrong they were. And I was just getting started.
I smoothed my simple black dress as I pulled into the circular driveway of my Aunt Margaret's mansion. The late September sun glinted off dozens of luxury cars. Mercedes, BMWs, even my Uncle James's new Porsche. My used Honda Civic looked exactly like what they expected from me. Modest, struggling, unremarkable. Perfect. The invitation to this year's family reunion had arrived 3 weeks ago, heavy cream cardstock with gold embossing. Celebrating the Martinez family legacy, it proclaimed in elegant script. I almost didn't come. After 15 years of snide comments and thinly veiled pity, I had better things to do than subject myself to another round of family hierarchy games. But today was different. Today, I had a reason to be here. Emily, you actually came. My mother's voice carried across the manicured lawn, a mix of surprise and embarrassment. She hurried over in her designer dress, already looking apologetic. I wasn't sure if you'd. Well, you've been so busy with your little job. I gave her a quick hug, breathing in her familiar perfume. Wouldn't miss it, Mom. Did you park around back? I can have James's son move your car. It's a bit visible here in front. It's fine where it is. I smiled, patting her arm. How's everyone? She launched into updates as we walked toward the house. Cousin David's new partnership at his law firm, Isabella's expansion of her medical practice, Marcus's recent feature in Business Weekly, success stories, all of them. The Martinez family specialty. The grand foyer was already crowded with relatives, all dressed to impress. Aunt Margaret's crystal chandelier threw rainbow prisms across silk blouses and tailored suits. The air smelled of expensive cologne and competition. Emily, a sharp voice cut through the chatter. My cousin Victoria appeared, champagne in hand, her diamond bracelet catching the light. I almost didn't recognize you without your store uniform. A few nearby relatives snickered. They thought I still worked at the mall bookstore where I'd started after college. It was easier to let them believe that. Good to see you too, Vicky. I kept my voice neutral, using the nickname she hated. She flinched slightly, but recovered with a practiced smile. It's Victoria now, actually. But how are you? Still at that entry-level position? You know, Marcus's firm is always hiring assistants if you need a real career path. And there it was. the first day of what promised to be many. I opened my mouth to respond when another voice joined in. Leave her alone, Victoria. Not everyone is cut out for success. Emily's just different. My cousin Alexander, Alex to everyone except the board of his investment firm, stepped up beside Victoria. He'd been the golden child since we were kids, destined to carry the family name to new heights. Now he managed millions and never let anyone forget it. Thanks for the concern, I said quietly, but I'm doing fine. Alex raised his eyebrows. Fine? Emily, you're 34 and still renting that tiny apartment in the bad part of town. When was the last time you even took a real vacation? The family's worried about you. No, they weren't worried. They were embarrassed. The Martinez family prided itself on achievement, on status, on winning. In their eyes, I was the cautionary tale. What happened when you didn't follow the prescribed path to success? If they only knew. I excused myself and made my way to the open bar, ordering a sparkling water with lime. Around me, conversations buzzed with business deals and vacation homes, private school admissions, and country club memberships. My Uncle James was holding court near the fireplace, describing his latest acquisition. Picked up this struggling tech firm for pennies on the dollar, he boasted. They had good bones but terrible management. Sometimes you have to be ruthless in business. I sipped my water, hiding a smile. James had no idea I'd been in the room for that deal. Sitting quietly at the end of the conference table, watching him negotiate with my board. He hadn't even glanced at me. Everyone. Aunt Margaret's voice rang out. Please join us in the dining room. Lunch is served. The crowd shifted, designer shoes clicking on marble floors. I found my assigned seat near the far end of the massive table, away from the successful branches of the family tree. My mother shot me an apologetic look from her spot near the head of the table. Still can't believe they seated you with us regular folk, my cousin Peter Stage whispered from across the table. Usually they keep the family disappointments in the kitchen. More Snickers. I focused on arranging my napkin, letting their words wash over me. Just a few more hours. So Emily, Alexander called down the table, his voice carrying deliberately. Tell us what's new with you. Any exciting developments in the book-stacking world? The table got quiet, waiting for my response. This was their favorite game, putting me on the spot, watching me squirm. I could feel Victoria's smug smile, see Alex's false concern. Actually, I said softly, there have been some changes. Oh, Victoria leaned forward. Finally got promoted to manager. Not exactly. I reached for my phone just as servers began bringing out the first course. Some sort of fancy salad with ingredients I couldn't pronounce. Well, don't keep us in suspense, Alexander laughed. What's the big news? Did you organize the self-help section alphabetically? The table erupted in laughter. Even my mother gave a weak smile, though she wouldn't meet my eyes. I let the moment stretch, taking a small bite of salad. Then I set down my fork and looked directly at Alexander. I've been meaning to talk to you about the Thompson account, I said calmly. He blinked. Excuse me. Your firm's handling of the Thompson portfolio. I've been reviewing the numbers, and I have some concerns about the risk exposure. The color drained from his face. How do you know about? Oh, and Victoria? I turned to my cousin, who had suddenly stopped laughing. The audit of your medical billing practices should be wrapped up by next week. I'm sure everything's in order, but you might want to double-check those Medicare claims from last quarter. The silence at the table was absolute. Even the servers had stopped moving. What? What are you talking about? Victoria's voice shook slightly. How would you know anything about my practice? I smiled and reached for my laptop bag. That's actually why I came today. I have something to share with the family. Emily. My mother's voice was sharp. What's going on? I opened my laptop, pulled up the email I'd received yesterday, and turned the screen so they could see the headline. Martinez Holdingius Konpledee ACQUIITION of Lee GACY P8RTERS GUROB NEU CEO NNOUNCD. Below was a photo of me shaking hands with the former CEO, Alexander and Victoria's father, who had no idea his own niece was the anonymous buyer he'd been negotiating with for months. You see, I said into the stunned silence, I've spent the last 10 years building something. While you were all busy mocking my little job, I was learning, watching growing. That bookstore. I bought it 3 years ago. Then I bought the whole chain. Then I started acquiring other businesses, quietly, through shell companies and holding firms. I looked at my Uncle James, including that struggling tech firm you thought you were buying last month. Sorry about that. By the way, I had to outbid you at the last minute. The sound of a glass shattering made everyone jump. Alexander had knocked over his wine, but he didn't seem to notice the spreading red stain. That's impossible, he stammered. Legacy Partners is a multi-billion-dollar company. You couldn't possibly have that kind of money. I finished for him. Funny how appearances can be deceiving. Would you like to see my portfolio? Or maybe just your new employment contract? I'll be reviewing all executive positions next week. Victoria's face had gone from pale to green. Her medical practice was owned by Legacy Partners. So was Alexander's investment firm. So were at least a dozen other businesses represented at this table. As of 9 this morning, I continued, I'm the CEO of Legacy Partners Group, which makes me. I paused, enjoying the moment. Your boss. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. The crystal water glasses on the dining table trembled as my Uncle James slammed his fist down. This is absurd, he roared. Some kind of sick joke. I calmly pulled out my phone and dialed a number on speaker. It rang twice. Ms. Martinez. A crisp professional voice answered. The papers are ready for your signature. Shall I have them messengered to your location? Yes, Sarah. And please send copies of the organizational chart to all Legacy Partners subsidiary emails. Effective immediately. Of course, Ms. Martinez. The board is eager to begin transition meetings on Monday. I ended the call and looked around the table. Would anyone like to check their work email? The sound of phones being frantically pulled from pockets filled the silence. Victoria's hands were shaking so badly she could barely type her password. Alexander just sat there, staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. Emily. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. How? I took a slow sip of water, remembering all the family dinners where I'd sat quietly, absorbing their insults while building my plan. It started the day Alex mocked my business degree from the state university, I said, meeting his eyes. Remember that? You said community college might have been more my speed. He swallowed hard, but didn't speak. That same day, I took my savings, all $12,000 of it, and bought stock in a small educational software company. Everyone thought I was crazy. 6 months later, Microsoft acquired them. I turned that investment into $180,000. But you live in that tiny apartment, Victoria sputtered. You drive a Honda. Because I was investing everything. While you were buying designer handbags, I was buying companies. While you were posting vacation photos from the Maldives, I was sitting in boardrooms under different names. Shell companies, holding corporations, private equity firms. I built them all quietly, carefully, with no one paying attention to the quiet girl from the bad side of the family. Aunt Margaret's hands gripped her silverware like weapons. Why? Why all the secrecy? I laughed softly. Because of this exact moment. Because every time you dismissed me, underestimated me, treated me like the family failure, you made it easier. No one suspects the person they're too busy looking down on. The bookstore, my mother said slowly. You really own it. I own the entire chain. 63 locations across 12 states. It was my first major acquisition. I kept working there because it was the perfect cover. Who would suspect the quiet assistant manager was actually the owner? Alexander finally found his voice. Our father's company. You can't. He would never sell to me. I finished. He didn't know he was selling to me. The purchase was made through Palmer Global Ventures, one of my holding companies. As far as he knew, he was selling to a European investment group. I sat in every meeting, taking notes in the corner. He never once looked at me. The sound of heels clicking on marble made everyone turn. Sarah, my executive assistant, stood in the doorway holding a leather portfolio. The papers, Ms. Martinez, and the organizational charts have been distributed. A chorus of phone notifications pinged around the table. I watched as my relatives opened the emails, their faces shifting from disbelief to shock to fear as they saw their names listed under mine in the corporate hierarchy. You can't do this, Victoria said, but her voice trembled. You can't just take over everything. Actually, I can. And I did. Legally, ethically, and completely. I stood up, smoothing my simple dress. Now, shall we discuss those Medicare billing irregularities? Or would you prefer to start fresh on Monday? She sank back in her chair, defeated. Emily, my mother tried again. All these years. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at her, remembering all the times she'd apologized for my failures, tried to hide me from important family events, suggested smaller dreams. Would you have believed me? I asked softly. The tears in her eyes answered for her. The board meeting is scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m., I announced to the table. Attendance is mandatory for all subsidiary executives. We'll be discussing the new direction of Legacy Partners Group, including performance reviews and organizational changes. You're going to fire us, Alexander said numbly. No, Alex. I'm going to do what you all taught me. I'm going to be ruthless in business. I picked up my laptop and turned to Sarah. Please have the cars brought around. I think this family reunion is over. Wait, Victoria called out as I reached the door. What do you want? Money? Position? Name your price. I turned back one last time, looking at the family that had spent years making me feel small. What I want, I said quietly, is for you all to remember this moment. Remember how it feels to realize you never really knew me at all. And on Monday, remember who signed your paychecks. As I walked out to my Honda Civic, which I kept precisely because it bothered them so much, I could hear the chaos erupting behind me. Accusations, excuses, the sound of a family realizing they created their own worst nightmare. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Your father's attorney called. He wants to discuss your purchase of the family estate. I smiled. They didn't even know about that yet. The best revenge isn't served cold. It's served quietly, patiently. one piece at a time, until there's nothing left to do but sit back and watch them realize how badly they underestimated you. And this was just the beginning. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. I stood in my private elevator, ascending to the top floor of Legacy Partners headquarters, watching the city skyline emerge through the glass. My reflection showed not the simple black dress from the reunion, but a tailored white power suit that cost more than my cousin Victoria's car. Today there was no need to hide. "Good morning, Ms. Martinez." Sarah greeted me, tablet in hand. "The boardroom is prepared, and security is in place as requested. Any early arrivals?" "Your Uncle James has been pacing the lobby since 8 a.m. Alexander and Victoria are sitting in their cars in the parking garage. They've been there for 30 minutes, but haven't come up yet." I smiled, afraid to face the new reality. "Also," Sarah continued, "your mother called 6 times this morning. She's apparently outside your apartment building, wondering why you're not there." Of course she was. They still thought I lived in that small apartment on the east side. None of them knew about my penthouse overlooking the lake, or my house in the Hamptons, or any of the other properties I'd acquired over the years. "Send a car for her," I said. "She should be here for this." The boardroom was impressive, all glass and chrome, with views of the city in every direction. The long mahogany table gleamed under recessed lighting, each place set with a leather portfolio and a tablet. At the head of the table, a single high-backed chair waited. My chair. By 8:55, they began filing in. First the independent board members, then the subsidiary executives, and finally my family. They moved like chastened schoolchildren, uncertain where to sit, avoiding my gaze. Victoria had clearly spent hours on her appearance, perhaps thinking she could charm her way out of this. Alexander wore his most expensive suit, but his confident swagger was gone. Uncle James looked like he hadn't slept in days. My mother slipped in last, escorted by Sarah. She froze when she saw me, taking in my appearance, my position at the head of the table, the way everyone else waited for my permission to sit. "Please, take your seats," I said, my voice carrying easily through the hushed room. "We have a lot to cover." The sound of chairs moving, papers shuffling, nervous throats clearing. 24 people waiting for the axe to fall. First, I began, "Let me officially welcome you to the new Legacy Partners Group. As your CEO, I want to be clear about our path forward." I tapped my tablet, and the screens around the room came to life with charts and projections. "Ms. Martinez," Uncle James interrupted, his voice strained, but trying for authority. "Before we continue, I think we should discuss the legitimacy of this situation." "Your objection is noted," I replied coolly, and dismissed. The acquisition was fully legal, approved by the board, and filed with the SEC. "But since you brought it up," I nodded to Sarah, who began distributing additional documents. "These are the complete financial records of every subsidiary under the Legacy Partners umbrella, including some interesting discrepancies in your division, Uncle James." He turned pale, papers trembling in his hands. "Don't worry," I continued. "I'm not interested in pursuing criminal charges. Consider this your chance at a fresh start. Clean books, clean operations, under new management." "You're blackmailing us," Victoria burst out, "using our own companies against us." "No, Victoria. I'm offering you a choice. You can either work within the new structure, following proper protocols and ethical guidelines, or you can resign. Your medical practices licenses and accreditations are tied to Legacy Partners. Think carefully about your decision." Alexander hadn't spoken yet. He sat staring at the financial reports, his face ashen. "You knew," he said finally. "All those years, at every family gathering, you were watching us, learning our weaknesses, planning this." "I learned from the best," I replied. "Wasn't it you who told me that business is about finding leverage and using it wisely?" My mother's voice shook as she spoke up. "Emily, please. We're your family." "Yes, you are. And as family, you taught me some valuable lessons. Like how appearance matters more than substance. How money equals worth. How to smile while cutting someone down." I stood, placing my hands on the table. "But most importantly, you taught me how to wait." I clicked to the next slide, showing the new organizational structure. Effective immediately, all subsidiaries will undergo complete audits. New compliance protocols are being implemented. Performance reviews will be conducted quarterly. And yes, some of you will be replaced. The room erupted in protests and pleas. I let them go on for exactly 30 seconds before raising my hand for silence. However, I continued when quiet returned. Those who choose to stay, who prove they can adapt and work ethically within the new system, will find opportunities for growth. Real growth, not the smoke and mirrors some of you have been hiding behind. I looked directly at Alexander. "Your investment firm has potential, cousin. But your risk management is sloppy. Fix it, or I'll find someone who will." He nodded slowly, understanding the reprieve being offered. "Victoria, your medical practice could be revolutionary in community care. Focus on patient outcomes instead of billing manipulation, and you'll have my full support." She wiped a tear quickly, trying to maintain composure. "Uncle James," I turned to him last, "your technology division is bleeding money because you refuse to innovate. Either embrace change or retire. Your choice." The next hour was detailed, methodical, and absolute. I laid out new policies, expectations, and consequences. Some cried. Some argued. Some sat in stunned silence. But all of them finally understood exactly who they were dealing with. As the meeting wound down, my mother approached my chair. "The house I grew up in," she said quietly. "You bought that too, didn't you?" "Last month," I confirmed, "along with all the family properties. Don't worry, I'm not evicting anyone. Consider it insurance against future family drama." She smiled sadly. "When did you become so powerful?" "I always was, Mom. You just never saw it." The room slowly emptied, my family members and executives filtering out to face their new reality. Sarah approached with more documents requiring my signature. "Oh, and one more thing," I called out as they reached the doors. "The annual family reunion will continue as scheduled. Same time, same place next year." I smiled. "But this time, I'm hosting." Alexander paused in the doorway. Why keep doing it? Why maintain any family connection after everything? "Because you all need to remember," I said simply. "Every year, every gathering, every holiday, remember the quiet girl you mocked. Remember the power you never saw coming. Remember that success isn't about who shouts the loudest, but who plans the longest." They filed out silently, leaving me alone in my boardroom, looking out over the city I'd spent a decade quietly conquering. My phone buzzed. A message from my real estate agent about another property acquisition. Below it, a text from Victoria. "I'm sorry for everything. Too little, too late. But maybe, just maybe, they'd finally learned something valuable. Never underestimate the quiet ones. We're usually just waiting for the perfect moment to show you exactly who we are. The Patterson family boardroom always felt cold, even in summer. Maybe it was the steel gray walls or the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Manhattan, but today it felt especially frigid. I sat at the massive oak table, my hands folded neatly in my lap, watching my father pace like a caged lion. Marcus Patterson wasn't used to waiting. As CEO of Patterson Industries for the past 30 years, he was used to others waiting for him. But today was different. Today, he had to wait for the family trust lawyer to arrive for what he thought would be a simple meeting, cutting off his only daughter from her inheritance. My brothers, James and Andrew, sat across from me, identical smirks on their faces. They'd always been Dad's golden boys, following his playbook to the letter. Business school, management training, corporate ladder climbing. Meanwhile, I'd chosen a different path. Finance, investment banking, private equity. Waste of time, Dad had called it. Real power is in running things, not counting other people's money. If only he knew. "Where is Harrison?" Dad snapped, checking his Patek Philippe watch for the third time in 5 minutes. "He's never late." "Traffic," I said softly, knowing exactly why our family lawyer was delayed. He mentioned having another meeting first. James snorted, probably trying to find a way to talk Dad out of this. He leaned back in his chair, adjusting his Italian silk tie. Not that it'll matter. I remained silent, thinking about the meeting I'd had with Harrison 3 months ago, right after I discovered what my brothers had been doing with the company's pension fund, the offshore accounts, the creative accounting, the massive loan they'd taken out to cover their tracks, a loan I now owned. The door opened, and Harrison walked in, his usual confident stride replaced by something more cautious. Behind him came another man, tall, sharp-suited, carrying a leather briefcase I recognized. "Mr. Patterson," Harrison said, his voice carefully neutral. "I apologize for the delay. This is Mr. Banks from Everett Capital Partners." He insisted on joining us. Dad frowned. "This is a family matter, Harrison. Why is there an outsider here?" Before Harrison could respond, I stood up, because I asked him to come. The room went silent. My father's eyes narrowed, that familiar look of disappointment crossing his face. "Olivia, what are you playing at?" Mr. Banks placed his briefcase on the table and clicked it open. "Perhaps we should begin with the reason for today's meeting, Mr. Patterson. You wanted to discuss changes to the family trust." Dad straightened, regaining his composure. "Yes, simple changes. My sons will inherit equal shares of the trust and company leadership. Olivia will be removed entirely." "I see." Mr. Banks pulled out a folder. "And the reason for this change?" "She's not qualified," James cut in. "She abandoned the family business years ago, went off to play banker while we stayed and built something real." I almost smiled at the irony. Almost. "Actually," Mr. Banks said, laying out several documents, "we should discuss qualifications, particularly regarding the company's current financial position." Andrew leaned forward, his face darkening. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Everything," I said quietly. "Tell them, Mr. Banks. Tell them who really owns Patterson Industries' debt now." My father's hand froze on his water glass. "What?" Mr. Banks cleared his throat. 3 months ago, Patterson Industries took out a $40 million loan to cover what was listed as operational expenses. This loan was secured against company assets, including the family trust holdings. Last week, that loan was purchased by a private investment group. "So," James snapped, What does that have to do with Olivia? I stood up slowly, placing my own folder on the table. The investment group is mine, James. I own your debt. All of it. The color drained from my father's face. That's impossible. You couldn't. Couldn't what, Dad? Couldn't figure out what they were doing? Couldn't trace the money? Couldn't afford to buy a $40 million loan? I opened the folder, revealing bank statements and transfer records. While you were busy dismissing me as just your disappointing daughter, I was building my own empire. And now, I own yours. James jumped to his feet. She's bluffing. She has to be. Mr. Banks shook his head. I assure you, she's not. Ms. Patterson's investment firm now holds controlling interest in your debt. And given certain irregularities we've discovered in the company's pension fund management, she would be within her rights to call that debt due immediately. The room erupted into chaos. James started yelling about family loyalty. Andrew slumped in his chair, his face ashen. But my father just stared at me, seeing me clearly for perhaps the first time in 20 years. Why? He whispered. Why do this? I picked up my phone, pulled up a video, and played it. The security footage showed James and Andrew in the company vault late at night, removing documents, replacing files. Because someone had to stop them, I said. Someone had to protect the people whose pensions they were stealing, the families they were destroying. I paused the video. I tried to tell you last year, remember? But you said I was just jealous of their success. Harrison cleared his throat. Mr. Patterson, given these revelations, perhaps we should postpone any changes to the trust until what? I cut in. Until they find another way to hide what they've done. No, we're going to handle this now. I turned to Mr. Banks. Show them the terms. He pulled out another document, this one thick with legal language. Ms. Patterson is prepared to restructure the loan, maintain the company's operations, and protect the pension fund on one condition. What condition? My father asked, his voice barely audible. I met his eyes. I take control. Full control. The company, the trust, everything. James and Andrew resign immediately, and you step down as CEO. You can't do this, James snarled. We're family. Family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family doesn't steal from their workers. Family doesn't destroy lives for profit. And family, I stood up, gathering my things, doesn't throw away their daughter without consequences. I headed for the door, then turned back one last time. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. After that, I call the loan, and everything you built comes crashing down. Oh, and Dad? I smiled, cold and sharp. It turns out, I can read a financial statement after all. As I walked out, leaving them with their shock and their lawyers, I thought about the long game I'd played. The years of being underestimated, dismissed, pushed aside. They thought they were teaching me my place in the world. Instead, they taught me how to take their world apart. The next morning dawned cold and clear, the kind of October day that makes Manhattan feel like it's made of glass and light. I sat in my corner office at Blackwood Investment Partners, 40 stories above the city, watching the sun glint off neighboring buildings while I waited. The antique clock on my wall, the only thing I'd kept from my old office at Patterson Industries, showed 8:57 a.m. The deadline I'd given my family was 9:00 a.m. 3 minutes until I found out if they were ready to face reality or if I needed to start dismantling their empire. Sophia, my assistant, buzzed through on the intercom. Miss Patterson? Your father is here. Alone. Interesting. Send him in. The door opened, and Marcus Patterson walked in. He looked older than he had yesterday, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. Gone was the commanding presence that had dominated boardrooms for 3 decades. In its place stood a man realizing his kingdom was built on sand. Olivia. He stopped a few feet from my desk, uncertain for perhaps the first time in his life. I didn't stand, didn't offer him a seat, just watched him, remembering all the times I'd stood in his office trying to earn a scrap of approval. The papers are signed, he said finally, placing a thick envelope on my desk. Full control of the company, the trust, everything. James and Andrew submitted their resignations this morning. I picked up the envelope but didn't open it. Where are they? James is meeting with his lawyer. Andrew is probably at the airport by now. Said something about needing time to think. Running away, I translated. Like always. Dad flinched. They're still your brothers. Are they? I stood, walking to the window. When was the last time they acted like it? When was the last time any of you treated me like family? We were trying to protect you. I turned sharply. Protect me? By stealing from people's pensions? By cooking the books? By trying to cut me out of my inheritance? That's not. He started, then stopped. Sank into one of the leather chairs facing my desk. I didn't know about the pensions, about what they were doing. I should have. But you didn't want to see it. I finished. Just like you never wanted to see me. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. How long have you known about what they were doing? I walked back to my desk, pulled out a thick file. I started suspecting something last year when I was reviewing some market data. Patterson Industries' reported earnings didn't match its cash flow patterns, so I dug deeper. Opening the file, I spread out documents across my desk. Bank statements, transfer records, emails between James and Andrew discussing how to hide their tracks. They started small, I continued. Skimming from the pension fund, using the money for personal investments. When those went bad, they took more to cover their losses. By the time I found out, they'd stolen nearly $30 million. Why didn't you come to me? I did. My voice was ice. Last Thanksgiving, remember? You said I was just trying to cause trouble, that I should focus on my own life instead of interfering with theirs. He remembered. I could see it in his face. So I did exactly that, I said. I built my own investment firm, made connections, waited for them to make their next move. When they took out that loan to cover the missing pension money, I was ready. And now, he asked quietly, what happens now? I sat back down, opened my laptop. Now I fix what they broke. The pension fund will be fully restored. The company will be restructured, transparent, ethical, and James and Andrew will face consequences. I met his eyes. I've already forwarded evidence to the SEC. They'll probably avoid jail time if they cooperate, but their careers in finance are over. He nodded slowly, looking suddenly ancient. And me? That depends, I said. Are you ready to finally see me? Really see me? I see you now, he whispered. God help me, I see you now. I pulled out another document, slid it across the desk. Then prove it. This is a consulting contract. 3 years, advisory role only. You help me clean up this mess, rebuild the company's reputation. But I'm in charge. He picked up the contract, hands shaking slightly. Why offer me anything? After everything. Because unlike them, you didn't steal. You were just blind. I paused. And because someone once told me that real power isn't just in taking control, it's in knowing when to show mercy. Who told you that? Mom did. I watched his face carefully. The day before she died, when she made me promise to watch over the family legacy. Not the money or the company. The values she thought we still had. For the first time in years, I saw tears in my father's eyes. She always saw things clearer than I did. Yes, I agreed. She did. The silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of missed opportunities and unspoken words. Finally, he picked up the pen I'd left next to the contract. If I sign this, he said, what guarantee do I have that you won't just destroy everything anyway? The same guarantee I had growing up, I replied. Not at all. You'll just have to trust me. Like I once trusted you. He signed. As he stood to leave, he turned back. The woman you've become, your mother would be proud. I know, I said softly. I just wish you had been too. After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, looking at the signatures on the contracts that changed everything. The company was mine now. The trust, the legacy, everything they tried to take from me. But as I looked out over the city I'd conquered, I realized this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because taking control was one thing. Keeping it would be another battle entirely. 6 months passed like a storm. Fierce, transformative, and leaving nothing untouched in its wake. I sat in what used to be my father's office, now mine, reviewing the quarterly reports that showed just how much had changed at Patterson Industries. The pension fund was fully restored, with additional compensation for affected employees. Our corporate governance structure had been completely overhauled. Transparency initiatives were in place, and our stock price, after an initial drop when the scandal broke, was slowly climbing back up. But not everyone was happy with the new regime. Sophia knocked on my door. Miss Patterson? The board members are assembled for the quarterly meeting. I closed the report and stood, straightening my blazer. Thank you, Sophia. And the other matter? She handed me a thin folder. Just arrived. You'll want to see this before you go in. Inside was a letter from James's lawyer, demanding a review of his resignation terms, claiming coercion, threatening legal action. Typical James, always thinking he could bully his way back to power. I smiled, tucked the folder under my arm, and headed to the boardroom. The tension was palpable as I walked in. Half the board were old guard. My father's cronies who'd looked the other way for years. The other half were my appointments, ethical, sharp, and uncompromising. The divide was visible even in how they sat, clustered on opposite sides of the table. My father sat in the corner, quiet but watchful. In the past 6 months, he'd surprised me. He'd actually been helpful during the transition, providing insights into old agreements and relationships that needed attention. Maybe he was trying to atone. Maybe he just wanted to stay relevant. Either way, I'd keep him close. Trust, but verify. Another lesson learned the hard way. Good morning, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. Let's begin with the quarterly numbers. For the next hour, we went through the standard updates. Revenue was stabilizing. New compliance measures were in place. Employee confidence was rising. Then came the part I knew would spark conflict. Now, regarding the proposed restructuring of our international operations, Ms. Patterson interrupted Harold Winston, one of the old guard directors. Before we continue, there's something the board needs to discuss. I raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable, but pressing on. We've received, concerns about the pace and extent of changes being implemented. Some major shareholders feel. You mean James feels? I cut in. Let's not pretend this is coming from anywhere else. I received his lawyer's letter this morning. Murmurs around the table. Winston shifted in his seat. James represents significant family interests. James represents nothing, I said sharply. His shares are in trust pending the SEC investigation. He has no standing here. But the family legacy. The family legacy. I stood up slowly, placing both hands on the table, was nearly destroyed by the very people you're trying to defend. Or have you forgotten about the stolen pensions? The fraudulent reports? The families who almost lost everything? Silence fell. Even Winston looked away. I opened my laptop, turned it to face the board. Since we're discussing family interests, let me show you something. On the screen was a series of emails, old ones, dating back years, showing board members, including Winston, being warned about irregularities in the company's finances. Warnings they'd ignored. I've been very generous, I continued. When I took control, I could have cleaned house entirely, reported everyone who turned a blind eye. But I believed in second chances. I closed the laptop. Don't make me regret that decision. The message was clear. The old guard slumped in their seats. Now, I said, sitting back down, shall we return to the international restructuring? The rest of the meeting proceeded smoothly. Afterwards, my father lingered behind. That was well handled, he said quietly. I learned from watching you, I replied. The good and the bad. He nodded, understanding the double edge in my words. James won't stop, you know. He'll keep trying to find a way back in. Let him try. I gathered my papers. I'm not the same person he could push around anymore. No, my father agreed. You're not. He paused at the door. Your mother? She always said you were stronger than all of us combined. I never understood what she meant until now. I watched him leave, thinking about how much had changed. Not just in the company, but in me. That evening, I had dinner with Harrison, our family lawyer, now one of my most trusted advisors. James filed the lawsuit, he said, passing me the documents. Claims emotional distress, undue influence, the usual desperate allegations. I skimmed the filing, then set it aside. Let him waste his money. We have everything documented. He's also been reaching out to old business partners, trying to rally support. I know. I sipped my wine. That's why I've been meeting with them myself. Amazing how quickly loyalty shifts when you show people proof they were being deceived for years. Harrison studied me over his glasses. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I had to. I looked out the restaurant window at the city lights. They taught me that. Every time they dismissed me, underestimated me, pushed me aside, they taught me to plan 3 steps ahead. And now I make sure it never happens again. I turned back to him. The company moves forward. Ethical, strong, the kind of legacy my mother would have wanted. And your brothers? They made their choices. I shrugged. Now they live with the consequences. Later that night, I stood in my office, looking at an old family photo on my desk. All of us together, smiling, before greed and power had torn everything apart. I picked it up, then deliberately placed it in a drawer. That chapter was closed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Competitors trying to take advantage of our past scandal. James's lawsuit to deal with. Old allies to manage and new ones to make. But I was ready. because they tried to write me out of the family story. Instead, I'd written my own ending. And this time, I held the pen.